My parents demanded $75,000 for raising me, then tried to force my brother to choose between college or loyalty, so I paid his tuition myself. Until the age of 10, I lived with my Aunt Elise, 52, and Uncle Robert, 54, both females. My parents, Susan, 49, and Andrew, 51, worked in construction management overseas and left me with Elise when I was 3 years old. They called maybe once a month and sent birthday cards, but I scarcely knew them. Elise and Robert were my true parents in every manner that mattered. They taught me how to ride a bike, helped me with my homework, and attended school plays. When I was 10, my parents returned with my baby brother Lucas, who is now 18 years old and male. They had this great idea to be a regular family today. The difficulty was that I did not want to leave Elise and Robert. I threw tantrums, refused to pack, and cried for weeks following the relocation. My parents became unhappy with my behavior and began limiting my visits to Elise's place. They told me I needed to change and stop living in the past. The house was not like anything I'd seen before. Andrew had a short temper and would rant about minor infractions such as leaving shoes in the incorrect place or not finishing meals quickly enough. Susan was always preoccupied with Lucas and considered my demands for attention as disruptions. I began behaving out at school, getting into fights, and my grades suffered. When I was 16, Elise and Robert were killed in a house fire. They were sleeping when an electrical breakdown occurred. I was distraught, but my parents would not let me take time from school. Andrew stated that while mourning is natural, life must go on. When my guidance counselor suggested that I talk to someone about the loss, Susan dismissed it as a waste of money and advised me to toughen up. I began skipping classes and hanging out with students who smoked under the gym. I tried marijuana for the first time that year and began drinking on weekends. I wasn't hooked or anything severe, but I was certainly making poor decisions. One night, I arrived home inebriated, and Andrew was waiting for me. He grabbed my arm, shook me, and said I was a disappointment to the family. The following day, they enrolled me at a boarding school 3 hours away. The boarding school did assist. It had structure, decent teachers, and I was free of the continual stress at home. I improved my academics, stopped drinking, and graduated with good scores. I even got into a public institution on a half scholarship. However, Andrew declined to help with the remaining tuition. He said he had already spent enough money on me through boarding school tuition, and I needed to learn responsibility. I took out school loans and worked 2 part-time jobs to cover my expenditures. Meanwhile, Lucas received a car for his 16th birthday, and my parents established a college fund for him while he was still in middle school. Following graduation, I relocated to another city for job. I began as a junior analyst at a technology company and worked my way up over 6 years. Last month I was promoted to senior manager, with a hefty salary rise. I currently earn $95,000 per year, which is more than I ever expected growing up. I was excited about the promotion and wanted to spread the word. I called Susan and informed her about the new employment. Her first query was if I was certain the job was authentic. She inquired if they had conducted a thorough background check and expressed surprise that a company would recruit someone with my past. I reminded her that my so-called history consisted solely of teenage drinking and poor academic performance, with no criminal record. Andrew picked up the phone and began asking thorough questions about my income and benefits. He wanted to know exact figures, how much I paid in taxes, and what my monthly costs were. I assumed he was merely curious about my life, so I responded honestly. Then the conversation took an unusual turn. Andrew began discussing all the money they had spent on me over the years. He noted the boarding school fees, which were approximately $30,000. He brought up medical bills from when I had pneumonia at the age of 12. He also estimated the expense of food and housing while I was with them. Susan jumped in, saying that now that I was making excellent money, it was time to start paying them back. She explained that Lucas was entering college next year and that they needed assistance with his expenditures. Andrew concurred, stating that successful children had a responsibility to assist their parents, especially after everything they had given. I wondered what they meant by sacrifices. Andrew mentioned the boarding school again, as well as the cost of flying back from overseas to deal with my behavioral issues when I was younger. Susan described how uncomfortable it was when teachers complained about my low performance and how it harmed their reputation in the community. I tried to explain that I had previously paid my own way through college and was just starting to save. Andrew intervened and stated that it was immaterial because family comes first. He calculated that I should be able to pay them at least $500 per month, plus help with Lucas's college expenses. The conversation lasted 2 hours. They took turns explaining why I owed them money and how Lucas deserved the same opportunities they denied me. Susan stated I was being selfish by keeping all of my earnings when I should be assisting my family. Andrew reminded me that he was becoming older and might require financial assistance in retirement. I said I needed to think about it and ended the call. But I couldn't quit thinking about how they handled Lucas compared to me. He received the college fund, the car, a solid living situation, and their undivided attention. Boarding school was my punishment, and student loans taught me about responsibility. 3 days later, Susan called back. She had devised a payment plan in which I would pay them $600 each month for the next 5 years to reimburse their previous expenses. She also requested that I start contributing $300 per month to Lucas's college fund immediately. She explained that they had already informed Lucas that I would be assisting him with his schooling and that he was looking forward to attending his first-choice school. I questioned her why they never mentioned repayment before I was promoted. Susan explained that they knew I couldn't afford it on my prior wage, but now that I was successful, it was time to move ahead. She also remarked that all of their friends' children helped support their parents and she was embarrassed to acknowledge that I had never contributed. Andrew called and told me I had 1 week to make a decision on the payment plan. He reminded me that my parents deserved to be respected and financially supported. He said if I declined, it would show that I was still the selfish person I had been as a teenager. Susan finished the call by adding she hoped I would make the right decision for the family. She stated that Lucas was dependent on my assistance, and I shouldn't let him down the way I had disappointed them when I was younger. I have not phoned them back, and the week's deadline passed 2 days ago. My phone has been constantly ringing, but I keep sending it to voicemail. The texts are becoming more confrontational, with Andrew accusing me of disrespect and Susan threatening to cut off contact if I do not react quickly. I kept thinking about how they never asked how I was doing after a promotion, or congratulated me on my accomplishment. The entire chat revolved around what I could do for them financially. I can't help comparing it to how they treat Lucas, who is praised for much smaller accomplishments, but has never been expected to contribute to the household. Part of me wonders if I really owe them anything for parenting me, even though it didn't feel like the kind of upbringing I received from Elise and Robert. Another part of me believes they are just interested in my achievement now because it will help them financially. I am not sure what to do next. Should I agree to provide some money to keep the peace, or should I simply ignore their demands? I'm torn between feeling ungrateful and thinking they're manipulative. Update 1. Since my previous post, the situation with my parents has deteriorated significantly. I declined to accept to their payment plan, but I also did not call them back to clarify my reason. I hoped that if I ignored it long enough, they would drop the matter and we could resume our normal distant but courteous relationship. I was mistaken. 2 weeks ago, Lucas called me. He was disappointed and perplexed since Susan and Andrew had informed him that I was paying for his college, but then abruptly claimed that I had changed my mind. He said they informed him I was going through a selfish period and didn't want to support my family anymore. Lucas asked me directly what was going on. I tried to explain that our parents had never discussed this college finance scheme with me previously and were asking that I pay for it. I informed him of their repayment demands and how they determined I owed them money for my childhood costs. He remained quiet for a long time after I described everything. Then he explained that he had no idea they were asking me to repay them for rearing me. He assumed I had offered to help with his college expenses since I was now successful. Susan had informed him that I was thrilled to be the big brother who could afford to help. Lucas apologized for assuming I had made a promise only to break it. He stated he would discuss the issue with our parents and make it clear that he did not expect me to pay for anything. I assumed that would be the end of it. Lucas seemed sensible and I assumed he would work things out with Susan and Andrew. But 3 days later, I received an angry voicemail from Andrew, who claimed I had poisoned Lucas against them and was attempting to destroy their family togetherness. Susan apparently became enraged when Lucas informed them that he did not need me to pay for college, and that he understood why I was not making regular payments. She accused me of influencing Lucas and turning him on his parents. Andrew claimed I was spreading lies about their parenting and trying to portray myself as a victim. The voicemail was 15 minutes long. Andrew went through a detailed accounting of what I had cost them financially and emotionally over the years. He mentioned the boarding school again, but this time he included interest charges as if the fees were a loan I had defaulted on. He determined that I now owe them about $75,000, including compound interest over the years. He also argued that my failure to assist Lucas demonstrated that I had never cared about family. He said that successful individuals usually help their families, and my selfishness demonstrated that I had not truly grown from the unhappy youngster they recalled. The message concluded with Andrew stating that they were done with my rude behavior. He said that if I did not provide them $1,000 as a good faith payment right away, they would consider me dead to them. Susan called in the end and claimed I was like my father's brother, who abandoned his family when he earned money, and they should have expected this type of betrayal. I had not heard of this uncle before. So I called my cousin David, 35 million, who was more knowledgeable about our extended family history. David informed me that Andrew's brother Paul had loaned Andrew money years ago to establish his overseas construction business. When Paul begged for repayment, when Andrew became successful, Andrew refused, accusing Paul of being greedy. They hadn't communicated for almost 20 years. This revelation made me think that Andrew could be putting his own guilt over the situation with Paul onto me. He owes money to a family member and never paid it back. But now he's demanding that I pay him for charges I never promised to pay. I decided to call Susan and try to calmly discuss the problem. I wanted to clarify that I was not attempting to harm Lucas or damage their family. I simply couldn't afford the payment schedule they had demanded. The conversation didn't go well. Susan immediately began ranting about how I had turned Lucas against them and derailed their plans for his schooling. She stated that Lucas was now asking why they treated me differently growing up, which was causing problems in their household. I inquired what she meant when she said Lucas was doubting their parenting. She explained that he had been wondering why I was sent to boarding school while he had never faced similar penalties for his mistakes. He also questioned why they had formed a college fund for him but not for me. Susan accused me for instilling these beliefs in Lucas's mind. She claimed I was jealous of Lucas's attention, and was attempting to make him feel bad about his advantages. She claimed I was trying to split their family because I couldn't accept that they loved Lucas more than me. That last part caught me off surprise. She had never explicitly stated that they treated us differently, or that Lucas was their favorite. I asked her to repeat what she just said about loving Lucas more. Susan paused, then clarified that she had not meant it that way. She attempted to backtrack, claiming that parents love all of their children equally, but some are easier to raise than others. She claimed Lucas was always well-behaved and grateful, but I had been difficult and demanding from the start. I asked her why they had separated me from Elise and Robert if I was so difficult too. Susan became defensive, claiming they were my true parents and had every right to raise me. She claimed Elise and Robert had spoilt me, making me expect special attention that the real world would not deliver. Susan demanded that I call Lucas and tell him that our parents had treated both of us fairly. She wanted me to persuade him that the disparities in our treatment were justified by my behavioral issues. She threatened that if I didn't remedy the mess I had caused, the rest of our extended family would learn how selfish and ungrateful I had become. I did not make the call to Lucas. Instead, I decided to cease replying to my parents' messages and phone calls altogether. I changed my work phone number and banned their personal numbers on my cell phone. However, they obviously obtained my new work phone number since my assistant informed me yesterday that a woman claiming to be my mother had called 3 times to speak with me regarding a family situation. She asked my assistant to validate my income and job title, alleging that she needed the information for insurance purposes. I instructed my assistant to direct any calls from Susan or Andrew to voicemail and not to disclose any information about my employment to anybody pretending to be family members. This morning, I discovered why they were so persistent in contacting me. Lucas texted me that Susan and Andrew had arrived at his university unexpectedly and caused a disturbance in his hostel. They were demanding that he phone me and ask me to start making monthly payments to them. Lucas reported that other pupils saw Susan crying in the hallway about how I had abandoned my family after becoming successful. Andrew was supposedly telling everybody who would listen that I owed them money and refused to pay my bills. When they refused to leave Lucas's dorm, university security had to take them off the property. Lucas was ashamed and asked if there was anything I could do to get them to stop involve him in our argument. I understood my technique of ignoring them was making it worse for Lucas. They were using him to get at me, and it was unfair to put him in that situation. I'm debating whether I should respond to them directly or continue to let them exacerbate the problem on their own. Update 2. I believe my parents would eventually calm down and stop demanding money, but the matter has gotten entirely out of hand. What I learned about their financial status has made things considerably more problematic. Following my last report, I decided to call Susan and Andrew to try to put an end to their harassment of Lucas. I wanted to have one final chat in which I explicitly explained my limits and requested that they leave my brother out of our conflict. The call began with Andrew immediately demanding to know why I had been ignoring them. He replied, "Successful people don't ignore their family responsibilities, and I was setting a bad example for Lucas." Susan interjected, saying that Lucas was suffering in college because of the stress I had caused by refusing to help with his tuition. I told them I'd consider paying a small sum to Lucas's schooling provided they stopped seeking repayment for my childhood costs. I thought this was a reasonable solution that would aid my brother without succumbing to their larger financial demands. Andrew quickly refused this offer. He claimed I couldn't choose which family commitments to fulfill. He wanted the whole monthly payment schedule we had agreed on, plus the college contribution, plus a lump sum to cover what he called back payments for the months I had already missed. During their dispute, Susan revealed some information that explained why they were so anxious for money. She added that they were overdue on their mortgage payments and had relied on my help to prevent foreclosure proceedings. After the call finished, I decided to conduct some research. I searched up public records for their property and discovered that they had refinanced their home 3 times in the previous 5 years. They currently owe more than the house is worth, and there are other liens on the property for unpaid construction costs. I also discovered that Andrew's construction business had failed 2 years ago. He had been bidding on jobs at a loss to keep the company afloat and had eventually declared bankruptcy. Susan's part-time employment at a dental office was insufficient to meet their costs after Andrew lost his company revenue. This knowledge made me conclude that their newfound interest in my success was not based on family responsibilities. They were in financial devastation and regarded my income as a solution to their issues. Their requests came shortly after I told them about my promotion, which made a lot more sense today. I decided to call Lucas and tell him what I had learned. He deserved to know that our parents were in significant financial distress and had planned to utilize my money to solve their problems without fully disclosing the truth. Lucas was startled when I told him about the mortgage problems and Andrew's failed business. He stated that our parents had never revealed any financial concerns to him. They had been discussing taking a vacation to Europe next summer and had recently purchased new furniture for the house. He said something else that disturbed me. Susan had been asking him comprehensive questions about my employment, my residence, and whether I had mentioned any savings or assets. She also suggested that he approach me for money personally, believing that I would be more generous if the request came from him rather than our parents. Lucas stated that he refused to manipulate me for money, which made Susan unhappy. She told him he was being naive about how families operated, and that successful siblings had a responsibility to aid less fortunate relatives. 2 days after speaking with Lucas, I received a certified letter from a lawyer representing Susan and Andrew. The letter said that I had verbally agreed to offer financial support to my parents and was now in breach of that commitment. The lawyer requested $15,000 in immediate back payments, plus $800 in monthly contributions. The letter also threatened to take legal action against me for the entire sum they claimed I owed for childhood costs if I did not react within 10 days. I brought the letter to my own lawyer, who informed me that the claims were absolutely untrue. You cannot make a verbal contract to repay someone for raising you as a child, and my parents had no legal right to seek money from me. The lawyer explained that the threatening letter was most likely a desperate attempt to scare me into paying. But the legal threat made me realize how serious the matter had gotten. My parents were willing to lie to a lawyer and possibly file bogus lawsuits to obtain money from me. They had gone well beyond normal family pressure and appeared to be harassing and extorting others. I decided to send a comprehensive response to their lawyer, noting that I had never committed to any payment plan and that their demands were based on inaccurate information. I also logged all phone calls, voicemails, and occurrences involving Lucas to demonstrate a pattern of harassment. My lawyer responded with a cease and desist letter, instructing Susan and Andrew not to contact me at work or involve Lucas in their financial troubles. My parents responded quickly and viciously. Susan contacted me from various phone lines throughout the day, leaving voicemails calling me callous and selfish. She claimed that I was destroying their family and that Elise and Robert would be ashamed of who I had become. Andrew left his own messages, threatening to contact my employer and reveal the type of person they had employed. He promised to make sure everyone in our hometown knew that I had abandoned my parents when they needed help. He also threatened to post about my childhood troubles on social media, destroying my reputation. Susan and Andrew arrived at my apartment complex last week, escalating the issue. They had sneaked past the security desk and were waiting in the hallway outside my door when I returned home from work. Susan began crying and begged me to reconsider my choice. She claimed they were about to lose their home and had nowhere else to turn for help. Andrew stood behind her, nodding aggressively and claiming that I was the only son who could save them from destitution. I told them they had to leave immediately, or I would contact building security. Susan grabbed my arm and told me that I couldn't just abandon my family when they were in severe need. Andrew began ranting about how much money they'd spent on me over the years and how I owed them my success. I had to contact security to escort them out of the building. The security guy informed me that Susan had been attempting to obtain my apartment number from the front desk for more than an hour before I arrived. She stated she had a family issue and needed to surprise me with critical news. Building management has now barred both of my parents from entering the property and set additional security measures to prevent them from returning. They also gave me documentation on the incident in case I needed it for legal reasons. The next day I discovered that Susan had contacted my company's main line and attempted to talk with my supervisor. She informed the receptionist that I had stolen money from my family and that my employer should be aware of my character issues. Fortunately, my employer had standards regarding personal calls and did not route her to anyone significant. I understood my parents were not going to halt their attempt to coerce me into giving them money. Their financial desperation had driven them to lie, threaten, and harass me in ways that exceeded any normal boundaries. Lucas called me after hearing about the incident in my apartment complex. Susan told him an entirely different narrative, stating that I was unpleasant and unfriendly when they attempted to visit me. She said I had threatened to have them arrested simply for wanting to see their son. I told Lucas everything what had transpired, including how they had lied to building security to get access to my floor. He remained silent for a long time before admitting that he was beginning to see why I had been so resistive to their demands. He also informed me that Susan and Andrew had been urging him to drop out of education and work to help pay their mortgage. They claimed that his education was a luxury they could no longer afford and that family responsibilities required everyone to sacrifice. This was the last bit of information I needed to see how desperate and deceitful my parents had become. They were willing to harm Lucas's future as well as our relationship, in order to solve their financial issues. Update 3. I've been putting off posting this update because I hoped the situation would improve, but it's evident that my parents' behavior will never alter. What occurred with Lucas convinced me that I needed to end all communication completely. After my last report, things went quiet for approximately 3 weeks. I hoped the legal cease and desist letter had finally convinced Susan and Andrew that they couldn't continue pressuring me for money. I was mistaken. The first indication that they were preparing something new was when Lucas called to inform me that our parents had enrolled him in a different college for the spring semester. They said his present institution was too pricey, and that he should transfer to a community college closer to home. Lucas was sad because he was doing well in his current school and had established friends there. He had also been accepted into a competitive program for his major that was not offered at the community college. When he contested the transfer, Susan informed him that the family could no longer afford luxuries such as prominent universities. But here's the part where I realized how manipulative they were being. Susan told Lucas that if I had been willing to help with tuition as promised, he wouldn't have had to transfer schools. She was exploiting his dissatisfaction with the school change to put pressure on me for money. Lucas saw right through this deception and declined to approach me about paying for his college. This infuriated Andrew, who warned Lucas that he was betraying the family by standing with me over his parents. The situation at their residence became so stressful that Lucas began staying with friends to avoid the regular fights over money and family devotion. Susan accused him of abandoning them, just as I had, while Andrew claimed that both of his sons were greedy and ungrateful. Lucas called me 2 weeks ago and cried. Susan and Andrew had told him that if he didn't come home right away and persuade me to start making payments, they would cease paying for his current semester and force him to drop out of college altogether. They were practically threatening his schooling in order to force him to manipulate me for money. This was new. Even their standards are low. They were willing to wreck Lucas's future to continue their campaign against me. I encouraged Lucas not to worry about his tuition and assured him that I would manage the problem. I contacted his school's financial aid office and agreed to cover his outstanding expenses for the current semester and the following year. I made it clear that this payment was exclusively for Lucas and did not constitute an acceptance of owing money to our parents. When Susan and Andrew discovered that I had paid Lucas's tuition personally, they were outraged. Andrew called me, yelling that I was undermining their parental authority and interfering with their family decisions. Susan accused me of attempting to steal Lucas away from them by paying for expenses they could not afford. They insisted that I cease paying his tuition and instead give them the money so they could handle his education on their own. When I declined, Andrew threatened to withdraw Lucas from college rather than allow me to sponsor his education. This threat made Lucas realize that his parents were more concerned with controlling the situation than with his actual well-being. He threatened that if they removed him from school out of spite, he would move in with me and they would never see him again. Susan began crying, claiming that both of her sons despised her and wished to destroy her family. Andrew accused me for turning Lucas against them, claiming I poisoned his mind with lies about their parenting. The ultimate showdown occurred when Susan and Andrew requested that Lucas choose between preserving a connection with them and receiving help from me. They felt he couldn't have it both ways, and accepting my tuition money meant breaking his parents' trust. Lucas told them he had chosen me. He claimed they had demonstrated their willingness to sacrifice his future for their personal financial gain, and he couldn't trust them to make decisions in his best interests anymore. Susan and Andrew disowned Lucas on the spot. They warned him he was no longer welcome at their house and that they would inform everyone that he had abandoned his family for money. Andrew stated that both of his sons were dead to him and that he regretted ever having children. Lucas moved in with me last week. He plans to finish college and then decide what kind of relationship he wants to have with our parents in the future. Right now, he claims he needs time to understand how willing they were to hurt him, only to get to me. I have received a few more threatening voicemails from Andrew, but they appear to have acknowledged that their tactic failed. Susan left one last message, stating she hoped I was content destroying my family and that one day I would realize what it was like to be abandoned by my own children. The irony is that they ruined their own family by prioritizing money over relationships. They lost both of their sons because they refused to understand that I had the authority to refuse their cash requests. I've blocked each of their phone numbers and email addresses. I also told my employer's security department about the earlier harassment in case they attempted to contact me at work again. Lucas has also blocked them, requesting that his school not share any information regarding his enrollment or grades with our parents. We are both doing great presently. Lucas is doing well in school and appears pleased to be away from the continual stress and manipulation at home. I'm focusing on my profession and finally saving money that I couldn't while worried about family issues. I sometimes wonder if things would have turned out differently if Susan and Andrew had addressed the situation honestly, rather than with demands and threats. If they had simply begged for help with their financial troubles and admitted their flaws and how they treated me growing up, I might have been willing to make a decent contribution. However, they chose manipulation, harassment, and emotional blackmail instead. They were willing to give up their connections with both of their sons for the money they felt they were entitled to receive. That was their choice, not mine. Lucas and I are now creating our own definition of family based on mutual respect and support, rather than obligation and guilt. We both realize that the people who share your DNA do not always deserve your allegiance. Susan and Andrew are still facing foreclosure and have been begging other relatives for money, according to the most recent information I have received from extended family. They've been telling people that their sons abandoned them in their time of need, but it appears that the majority of our family members are aware enough of the issue to look past their victim tale. I do not wish people harm, but I also do not feel guilty for declining to fix problems. They made it for themselves. They had options at every stage of the crisis, and they repeatedly prioritized money above relationships. They now have to deal with the consequences of their decisions. Lucas starts his sophomore year next month, and I'm very proud of him for standing up to their manipulation. He demonstrates that you may interrupt the pattern of poisonous behavior and pick healthy connections for yourself. As for me, I'm finally at peace with my decision to end communication. I spent years hoping to get their approval and acceptance. But now I see that once I became wealthy, they would never consider me as anything other than a potential source of income. I'm creating a life based on my own values and choices, rather than attempting to return debts I never owed to people who never truly viewed me as their son. Now let us go to the following narrative. Story 2. My best friend revealed his love to my fiancée just before our wedding. Now he's dating her sister, and our friend circle is in disarray. A shocking update. I never expected to be writing this, but I do need some advice. I'm Sam, a 28-year-old man, and I'm in a tricky position with my fiancée Myra, a 27-year-old woman, and my best friend Nathan, a 29-year-old man. It's been years in the making, and I don't know what to do. To get the complete picture, I need to take you back to the beginning. Nathan and I first met in 6th grade while working on a scientific project together. We connected over our shared passion of Star Wars and spent many hours debating which film was the best in the franchise. We were inseparable from that day on. Throughout middle and high school, Nathan was the most outgoing. He had a natural charisma that attracted others to him, but I was more quiet and socially awkward. However, Nathan never left me behind. He dragged me to parties, introduced me to new people, and encouraged me to come out of my shell. By the time we graduated high school, Nathan was responsible for my tiny but stable group of friends. We both got into state university and agreed to be housemates. College was a thrilling experience for us. Nathan joined a fraternity, whilst I focused on my education and joined the chess club. Despite our diverse interests, we always made time for one another. Every Friday night, we had a movie marathon in our dorm room, complete with microwave popcorn and cheap beer. Myra came into our lives during our sophomore year. She was a transfer student from California, with beautiful brown hair and the most contagious laugh I had ever heard. Nathan noticed her first in our combined economics class and was instantly enamored. He spent weeks getting up the guts to ask her out, and when he did, she accepted. Their connection was heated from the beginning. Myra was passionate and free-spirited, which complemented Nathan's adventurous character. They'd take unexpected road trips, crash parties, and engage in passionate disputes about anything from politics to pizza toppings. However, their devotion brought volatility. They'd have heated debates that would rock the walls of our hostel, followed by equally emotional reconciliations. When things were too hot, I often found myself in the midst, acting as a mediator. It was exhausting, but I loved deeply about both of them and wanted them to be happy. Despite the tension, there were also some enjoyable moments. We would regularly hang out together, and I came to consider Myra a close friend. After around 6 months, Nathan and Myra had their worst disagreement yet. I never got the complete story, but it involved Nathan's ex-girlfriend attending a party. Harsh words were spoken, allegations were made, and their relationship was officially finished. Nathan was devastated. He put up a tough front in public, but behind closed doors, he was a shambles. I spent endless nights listening to him rage and cry about Myra. He'd switch between wrath and sadness, often inside the same sentence. It was at this point that I recognized how deeply Nathan had fallen for Myra and how much the breakup had devastated him. As Nathan attempted to move on, Myra and I became closer friends. It began simply enough. We'd have coffee between classes or study in the library. I was taken to her brains and unique sense of humor. She had a jaded yet hopeful view on the world, and I enjoyed hearing her perspectives on life. Something changed between us around a year after Nathan and Myra ended their relationship. We were attending a mutual friend's birthday party. As the night progressed, we became increasingly engaged in conversation. The rest of the party drifted away as we discussed our hopes, anxieties, and future goals. She kissed me as I walked her back to her dorm at night. I was astonished, happy, and immediately guilty. I knew Nathan was not over Myra, and I was concerned about how this would damage our friendship. Myra and I agreed to keep things private while we worked out our feelings. For the next few weeks, Myra and I met secretly. We'd go for lengthy walks through the park or have picnics in hidden areas on campus. I felt as if I was living in a happy bubble, but remorse lingered in the back of my mind. After about a month, we felt we needed to inform Nathan. I was frightened of losing my best buddy, but I knew I couldn't continue to lie to him. We sat him down in our dorm room and delivered the news. To my astonishment and relief, Nathan appeared genuinely thrilled for us. He said he was over Myra and relieved that his 2 greatest buddies had found each other. He hugged both of us and joked about becoming our wingman. I felt as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. For the next few years, everything seemed ideal. Myra and I grew closer, and our connection deepened. Nathan remained a constant in our life, and the 3 of us frequently hung out together. We all graduated, obtained jobs in the same city, and remained a close group. Last year, I decided to propose to Myra. I spent months planning the perfect proposal, with Nathan's aid to make it extra special. On a lovely fall evening, I took Myra to the rooftop garden for our first official date. With the city lights glittering below us and lovely music playing in the background, I got down on one knee and asked her to marry him. She agreed, and as we hugged, Nathan emerged with champagne to celebrate with us. I asked Nathan to be my best man, and he happily agreed. He poured himself into organizing my bachelor party and assisting with wedding plans. He was the buddy I'd always known to be encouraging, enthusiastic, and always ready with a joke to lighten the mood when wedding stress became too much. But approximately 2 months ago, things began to alter. Nathan started acting strangely around Myra. He'd make bizarre remarks about their previous relationship or bring up internal jokes they used to have. At first, I dismissed it as nostalgia, but it became more regular. Then, last week, everything came apart. Myra approached me in tears after a mutual friend's birthday party. She claimed Nathan cornered her at the party and revealed that he still had feelings for her. He informed her that he had never stopped loving her and that marrying me would be a mistake. Myra was stunned and immediately left the party to inform me. I confronted Nathan the following day. To his credit, he did not attempt to refute it. He admitted everything Myra had told me. He stated he had suppressed his feelings for years and couldn't take the thought of Myra marrying someone else, even if it was me. He begged me to understand, stating he couldn't help his feelings. I was infuriated. I felt deceived by my dearest buddy of more than 15 years. Had all of his efforts to promote our relationship, including a proposal and wedding plans, been an act? I informed Nathan that I wanted space and that he was no longer welcome at the wedding. He departed looking distraught, and I haven't spoken with him since. Now I am torn. A part of me wants to forgive Nathan. We've been through a lot together, and I understand how much Myra has hurt him in the past. I recall how distraught he was after their breakup, and I'm curious if he ever completely got over her. But another part of me is enraged and believes this is an inexcusable breach of trust. He's had years to accept Myra and I's relationship. Why wait until we're ready to get married to bring this up, and then go behind my back and declare his affections to Myra? This feels like a betrayal of our friendship. Myra is naturally uncomfortable around Nathan right now, and she does not want him at our wedding. She admits to feeling guilty despite the fact that she did nothing wrong. I despise seeing her upset and knowing that my best buddy caused the anguish. I'm also concerned about how this may influence our larger friend group. Nathan and I have numerous shared friends, some dating back to high school. I don't want to force them to take sides, but I'm not sure I can be around Nathan right now without feeling angry and betrayed. Our wedding is in 3 months, and what should have been a happy occasion is now clouded by this drama. I'm having trouble focusing on work, and Mir and I are bickering more as the stress of the situation mounts. Am I overreacting? Should I try to recover my friendship with Nathan, or is this the end of it? How can I maintain my friendship with Myra while navigating this mess? Any advice would be greatly appreciated. Update 1. It's been nearly a month since my previous post, and a lot has happened. I would want to thank everyone for their advice and support. It truly helped me have a better perspective on the problem. After much deliberation and several lengthy conversations with Myra, I decided to meet with Nathan to completely understand his perspective. We planned to meet at Oakwood Park, where we used to hang out as children. It felt appropriate given the history of our friendship. When I got to the park, I spotted Nathan seated on our old favorite bench, near the duck pond. He looked dreadful, as if he had not slept well. As I approached, he stood up, his expression a mix of hope and dread. We began walking around the pond, with an unpleasant stillness between us. Finally, Nathan broke the ice. He began by apologizing profusely. He admitted that his acts were selfish and unacceptable. He added that seeing Myra and me so happy together had reawakened old feelings he believed were long forgotten. Then Nathan disclosed something I didn't know. He stated that he has been dealing with depression for the past year. He had lost his work 6 months ago and was too humiliated to notify anyone. The stress of unemployment, combined with watching Myra and I plan our wedding, had thrown him into a downward spiral. While I appreciated Nathan's candor, I informed him that his mental health difficulties did not excuse his behavior. I stated how upset and betrayed I felt, not only for myself, but also for Myra. Nathan listened intently and nodded, tears in his eyes. Just when I thought the conversation couldn't get much more heated, Nathan dropped a bombshell. He admitted that he had been surreptitiously seeing Myra's younger sister, Lily, 24F, for the past 3 months. They apparently reconnected during our engagement party and struck it off. Nathan expressed guilt about the relationship, which exacerbated his inner struggle and contributed to his outburst at Myra. I was shocked. This revelation added an entirely new level of intricacy to the problem. I asked Nathan why he hadn't told me about Lily earlier. He stated he was concerned about how I would respond considering our past with Myra, and he wasn't sure if the relationship would endure. As we continued walking, Nathan revealed more about his relationship with Lily. He stated that she had been a source of support during his despair, encouraging him to get therapy and even assisting him in finding work opportunities. He admitted that he was developing genuine love for her, which made him feel even more awful about his outburst at Myra. Following our conversation, I went home to share everything with Myra. She was just as astonished as I was by Nathan and Lily. She revealed that Lily had been acting strangely recently, canceling their weekly sister lunches and being vague about her plans. However, Myra had no idea it was due to her relationship with Nathan. Myra and I spent hours discussing the situation. We were both saddened and deceived by Nathan's behavior, but we also recognized the complex emotions at play. We discussed our personal relationships and how the incident had affected them. Myra admitted that she had been having reservations about the wedding, not because of Nathan's revelation, but because of the strain it had placed on our relationship. This admission sparked a serious, honest conversation about our future together. We renewed our love for each other and pledged to make our relationship work. We decided that, while Nathan could not attend our wedding as planned, we did not want to completely cut him out of our lives. We came to a compromise. We told Nathan that he may attend the wedding as a guest, but not as my best man. We also instructed him to keep his distance from Myra at the event and to bring Lily as his date to avoid any embarrassing situations. Nathan agreed to our terms, obviously happy that he hadn't lost us altogether. He pledged to respect our boundaries and improve himself to be a better friend. He also mentioned that he had started seeing a therapist to deal with his sadness and other concerns. Myra spoke with her sister for quite some time about Lily. Lily apologized for keeping her relationship with Nathan a secret, promising to be more transparent in the future. She also convinced Myra that her love for Nathan were genuine and not a ploy to get back at her sister. The situation is still stressful, but it appears to be improving. Our friends have been understanding, and no one has been pressured to take sides. Some friends have even shared their own stories of problematic relationships, making us all feel less alone in this difficult circumstance. Myra and I have chosen to postpone our wedding for a few months. We want to give ourselves time to recover and deepen our relationship before taking such a significant move. We're also using this time to reconnect with each other, go on dates, and reflect on why we fell in love in the first place. Nathan has put himself into his job search and rehabilitation. He calls once a week to check in, always respecting our boundaries. It's a gradual process, but I can see hints of my old pal appearing. Our wedding is now scheduled for next spring, and while it will not go exactly as planned, Myra and I are focused on our love for each other. We're resolved not to let the drama overshadow our big day. I'll update again after the wedding. Thank you all again for your encouragement and wisdom. It's been a hard month, but I'm optimistic about the future. Update 2. It has been 3 months since my last update, and I am writing this from a beachside cafe in Bali, where Myra and I are on honeymoon. A lot has happened, and I would like to share it all with you. First, the wedding. Despite the drama leading up to it, the day itself was stunning. We picked a small personal wedding at a nearby botanical park. The weather was ideal, sunny with a moderate breeze that made the flowers dance. Myra was lovely in her flowing white dress, and I felt like the luckiest man alive. As we exchanged vows, I noticed tears in her eyes, echoing mine. In that instant, all of the stress and drama of the previous months vanished. We simply promised to love and support each other no matter what life threw at us. Nathan came as a guest with Lily, as we had arranged. He maintained his distance from Myra and remained respectful during the event. I could see a range of emotions on his face. Happiness for us is laced with melancholy and regret. However, he made an effort to be sincerely supportive, even sharing a heartfelt congratulations with us during the reception. However, the true drama occurred later at the reception. My cousin Alex, 26 million, who had taken over as best man, became intoxicated and decided to give an impromptu speech. He began talking about Nathan and Myra's previous relationship, seemingly unaware of the current tensions. The room fell silent, and I could see Nathan squirming in his seat. Myra grasped my palm tightly under the table. Just as I was ready to intervene, Lily stood up. She calmly but firmly urged Alex to sit down before giving a lovely toast to Myra and myself. She discussed the power of our relationship and how love can conquer any difficulty. It was a wonderful moment that relieved stress and brought tears to many people's eyes, including mine. After the wedding, Myra and I went on our honeymoon. We spent 2 weeks traveling around Europe, enjoying each other's company and beginning our married life. During this journey, Myra told me some shocking news. Remember how I mentioned Nathan's struggle with depression? It turns out that Lily is a psychologist who specializes in relationship counseling. She had been assisting Nathan in working through his challenges, which was how they first became close. Myra learned about this via her parents, whom Lily had confided in. This insight provided a new viewpoint. While this did not excuse Nathan's behavior, it did assist to understand part of it. Myra and I agreed that we were delighted Nathan was getting care, even though the circumstances were complicated. When we got back from our honeymoon, we asked Nathan and Lily over for dinner. It was odd at first, but as the evening proceeded, we all became more relaxed. Nathan apologized once more for his previous behavior and stated that he has been making progress in his therapy sessions with a different psychologist to prevent any ethical difficulties with Lily. Myra and Nathan shared a private talk that they both described as healing. They were able to discuss some unsolved concerns from their previous relationship and clear the air. Myra stated that she felt like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Nathan and Lily's relationship seemed to be continuing well. They recently moved in together and are discussing buying a puppy. It still feels awkward to see them as a couple, but I'm getting used to it. Our friends have acclimated to the new dynamics. There are still some tense moments, but things are substantially better than they were a few months ago. Myra and I are settling into married life and planning our future together. We plan to buy a house and start a family within the next year or two. Despite the challenges, this experience has strengthened our connection. I am appreciative for the help and advice I have received here. It helped me go through a challenging situation while keeping my marriage and friendships intact. Life is rarely easy, but with communication, understanding, and a willingness to work through problems, even the most difficult situations can be conquered. Update 3. It has been 6 months since my last update, and I am returning with some unexpected news. Life has a way of tossing curveballs at you when you least expect them, and we've had our fair share. First, good news. Myra and I purchased our first Home together. It's a nice 3-bedroom cottage with a large backyard, ideal for the family we plan to start shortly. We've been busy decorating and personalizing our space. It feels wonderful to have a place that is completely ours. We've also focused on our careers. Myra received a promotion at her marketing agency, while I began a new project at my software company. It's been amazing to watch each other progress professionally while supporting one another at home. Now for the more complex stuff. Remember how I said Lily was helping Nathan with his depression? Well, it turns out that their bond was not as strong as we assumed. About 2 months ago, Lily approached us in tears. She admitted that she and Nathan had split up. What's the reason? Nathan kissed Myra's best friend, Emma, 27F, at a party. Lily apprehended them and put an immediate halt to the situation. She was devastated and felt deceived, especially given how hard she had fought to help Nathan overcome his problems. Myra and I were astonished. We thought Nathan had overcome his harmful habit, but he plainly still had a lot of work to do. Myra was enraged, not only for her sister's sake, but also because Emma had abused her trust. We agreed to confront Nathan together. He broke down and admitted to the kiss, claiming he had been drinking and made a terrible mistake. He said it meant nothing, and that he loved Lily. But the harm had been done. Emma contacted Myra to apologize. She admitted that she had always had a crush on Nathan, and became carried away in the moment. Myra informed her that she needed time and space to comprehend the betrayal. The consequences of this occurrence have been enormous. Our friendship circle is now again in turmoil. Some individuals are angry with Nathan. Others are disappointed with Emma. And everyone feels terrible for Lily. Myra and I have found ourselves in the midst of it all, attempting to encourage Lily while also processing our own sadness and irritation at Nathan. For the time being, we have opted to keep our distance from him. It is apparent that he needs to improve himself before he can be a decent friend or companion to anyone. Lily has been staying with us while searching for a new place. It's been nice to have her around, and Myra's enjoying reconnecting with her sister. They've been to yoga classes together and are planning a sister's trip later this year. As for Nathan, we last heard that he had accepted to intense rehabilitation. He reached out to apologize again, but we begged him to give us some space. We don't know what the future holds for our friendship, but for now, we must focus on healing and going forward. This entire experience has taught us a lot about the intricacies of relationships, the value of trust, and the necessity of personal development. Myra and I are happy that our bond has stayed strong throughout this. If anything, these hardships have drawn us closer together. We're looking forward to the future, particularly our new house and our intentions to create a family. Life may be unpredictable, but we are confronting it together, stronger than ever. Thank you for your continued support along this journey. Your guidance and good words have helped me get through some difficult times. I am not sure if I will update again, but I wanted to share the final chapter of our tale. Here's praying for calmer waters ahead. Mom mortgaged her house to fight me in court, all to defend my convicted brother's right to be near my 3 girls. Patrick, my brother, was convicted of pedophilia and served 5 years in prison for assaulting a 7-year-old. But when he got out, my entire family insisted that I let him around my 3 girls. When I declined, they launched a big harassment campaign, including having him show up at my 8-year-old's birthday party with a doll dressed in a swimming costume, forcing me to obtain a restraining order. But then my mother spent her retirement assets on his legal fees to battle me, while the entire family hounded us and filed fake CPS complaints, forcing us to pay him $30,000 to leave us alone. When my brother Patrick was released from prison, my mother contacted me 17 times. I knew exactly what she wanted before I picked it up. She had been preparing me for months with statements about forgiveness and second chances, but there was no way I was allowing a convicted pedophile near my 3 girls. Patrick had served a 5-year sentence for what he had done to his neighbor's daughter. The girl was 7. My oldest kid had just turned 8 years old, but I felt like the family monster for saying no. Mom arrived at my place the morning of his release. She had an entire speech prepared about how he transformed and discovered God. She pulled out a folder containing certificates from jail programs. He finished every course they offered, she stated. This effectively erased what he had done. Where is your Christian heart? I kept my response simple. He was not welcome in my home. Not for supper, not for the holidays, and not for 5 minutes. My girl's safety came first. Mom's expression changed from pleading to outright fury. She spat out. Those are his nieces. You are depriving him his family. The guilt campaign began immediately. My sister Beth called and cried about Patrick having nowhere to go. Every morning, Dad sends me Bible scriptures about forgiveness. Even my Aunt Helen, who lives 3 states away, felt compelled to tell me that everyone deserved a second shot. However, they saved the real manipulation for Sunday dinner. I had stopped at Mom's to pick up my grandmother's ring, which she had been resizing. The whole family was present. Patrick, too. He sat at the kitchen table as if nothing had occurred, as if he had not ruined a child's innocence. My daughter Elise exclaimed, "Uncle Patrick," before I could stop her. She dashed at him, her sisters close following. I've never moved that quickly in my life. I gathered all 3 children and went toward the door. Patrick had the audacity to appear hurt. "I only wanted to meet them," he explained softly. "I'm their uncle." That was when I lost it. I told him that being blood did not provide him access to my children. I reminded everyone in the room what he had been guilty of. Mom literally covered her ears. Dad grumbled something about lingering in the past. Beth accused me of traumatizing the girls. The smear effort began the next day. Mom informed her church that I was keeping her grandchildren from her. She conveniently left out why. Beth wrote on Facebook about how some people do not comprehend atonement. Several relatives responded with prayer hands and Bible quotes. My phone was inundated with messages from folks who didn't even know the complete situation. Then Patrick began turning up at locations like the grocery store and the park, always maintaining distance and claiming coincidence. He would wave to the females from across the playground. I began capturing everything: date, time, location, and witnesses. My spouse installed security cameras after we noticed him driving by our house 3 times in one day. The breaking point occurred during Jane's birthday party. We rented the community center and invited her to the entire class. Halfway through the cake, Patrick entered with a gift. Mom trailed behind him, smiling as if she had organized something wonderful. "Every girl deserves an uncle on her birthday," she stated. Parents began snatching their children and left. One father recognized Patrick from the register website. Within minutes, our daughter's party had been wrecked. Jane cried in the restroom as her classmates' parents murmured in the parking lot. He brought a bathing suit-clad doll as a present. I applied for a restraining order the next morning. That's when the real war began. Mom used her retirement resources to employ Patrick, a lawyer. They claimed I was alienating him from his family. The lawyer contended that Patrick had served his sentence and deserved to see his relatives. My mother testified against me in court. The judge granted a temporary order but warned that it might not last long. Patrick had finished his probation. He wasn't breaking any rules by being near us. The final hearing was scheduled for next month. Meanwhile, familial harassment escalated. Dad began turning up at my husband's workplace, urging him to speak reason into me. Beth attempted to pick up the girls from school, stating I had requested her to. The school had to remove my entire family off the permitted pickup list. Even family I hadn't spoken with in years took sides. Last night I discovered Elise going through old Christmas photos on my phone. "Why don't we see Uncle Patrick anymore?" she inquired. "Grandma says, you are being rude to him," I wanted to shout. Instead I hugged her tightly and changed the subject, but I knew this was far from over. The final hearing was in 2 weeks, and Mom had made it clear that she'd mortgage her house to fight me. That's when I realized how far this would go, and I knew I had to get ahead of whatever Mom was planning. The mortgage threat wasn't empty. She'd already spent her retirement savings on Patrick's lawyer. I began calling every family law attorney in town and scheduling consultations. If I could conflict them out by meeting with them first, Mom would have to look elsewhere for representation. My husband took time off work to assist with the girls while I prepared for court, and we enrolled them in after-school programs to reduce the possibility of unexpected family visits. After Beth's pickup attempt, the school principal agreed to personally escort them to the bus. 3 days later, I received a call from my cousin Cheryl, who had always remained neutral in family drama, and she asked if we could meet for coffee. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Cheryl looked exhausted as she sat across from me in the cafe. She looked around uneasily before pulling out her phone. "I need to show you something," she said, scanning through her texts. "Your mother has been organizing the family. She has a group chat." My stomach fell as I read the messages. 23 family members were actively plotting methods to push Patrick and my daughters to communicate. They talked about showing up at school activities, unexpectedly stumbling into us at the supermarket, and even having various relatives petition for grandparent rights to legally overwhelm me. Cheryl slid her phone back into her purse. The worst part was seeing how they talked about me. According to them, I was mentally unstable, vindictive, and poisoning my children against their loving family. Mom had convinced them all that Patrick's conviction was a misunderstanding, and that the girl's family had overreacted. "I have kids too," she added gently. I checked the court records. What did Patrick do? It was not a misunderstanding. I spent the rest of the day screenshotting everything Cheryl texted me. The group conversation revealed their whole playbook, and they intended to load the courtroom with supporting family members, including several aunts and uncles who had prepared character letters for Patrick. Mom had even persuaded my childhood pediatrician to write about how devoted Patrick had been. That evening, I discovered Patrick's truck parked across from our house again, this time with Mom by his side. They sat there for an hour just watching, and when my husband went outside to confront them, they drove away, only to return the next morning. The girls noticed the tension, and Jane inquired as to why we couldn't eat at restaurants anymore. Our lawyer suggested that the repeated surveillance could strengthen our case, but cautioned that family court judges frequently favored reconciliation. Patrick's completion of his sentence worked in his favor, and the system regarded him as rehabilitated. A week before the hearing, I was carrying groceries when I saw a woman observing me from across the parking lot. Elise asked why Grandma couldn't babysit, and I gave her vague excuses about everyone being busy. But kids are smart, and they sensed something was wrong. She approached me as I locked my trunk, introducing herself as Patricia from Child Protective Services. Someone had put in a report about me denying my children access to family. My hands shook as I gave her my lawyer's contact information. Patricia was professional, but thorough. Our lawyer subpoenaed the CPS complaint, which alleged emotional abuse through family alienation. The home visit went well, the girls' rooms were clean, the fridge was stocked, their artwork covered the walls, and they chatted happily with Patricia about school and friends. But I knew this was just another tactic to wear me down. It was no surprise that it came from Mom's address, as she had formally accused me of emotional abuse for protecting my children from a convicted pedophile. The irony would have been laughable if it hadn't been so terrifying. As the hearing approached, Patrick became more daring, jogging past our house every morning, always careful to stay on public property, and waving at the windows, knowing the girls might see. I kept them away from the front rooms, but it meant living like prisoners in our own home. Dad left voicemails about how I was destroying the family. Beth sent long emails about forgiveness and healing. Relatives I'd blocked created new social media accounts to message me. They all sang the same tune. I was cruel, unreasonable, and unchristian. Then came the letters. Mom orchestrated a campaign in which family members wrote I intercepted the letters addressed to them at our house, but the violation felt profound. They were attempting to manipulate my children directly now. I read each letter before shredding it, and they all followed a template. How much they missed the girls. How sad Uncle Patrick was. And how Mommy was keeping them apart. One aunt even included photos of Patrick looking dejected. My husband installed additional locks and an alarm system, and another sent drawings Patrick had allegedly made for them in prison. I'm curious why the entire family is so invested in defending Patrick's rights. With 23 relatives in a group chat and coordinated letters from everyone. We changed our routes to school and activities. I started grocery shopping in the neighboring town, and we basically went into hiding while living in our own house. The weekend before court, Mom made her biggest move yet. She filed for emergency grandparent visitation rights, painting me as an unstable mother who had cut off family access without cause. She demanded immediate supervised visits with the girls, with Patrick allowed to attend as their uncle. Our lawyer called it a kitchen sink approach. Throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. The emergency petition would be heard alongside our restraining order request, and Mom was hoping that a judge would compromise by denying the restraining order but granting her some visitation. I spent that weekend organizing evidence, security footage, documentation of every encounter, group chat screenshots, character references from teachers and doctors who actually knew. The morning of the hearing arrived gray and drizzling. I dressed carefully, conservatively but not severely, and my husband wore his only suit. We dropped the girls off at school early, my stomach turning at leaving them, even with the new security measures. The courthouse parking lot was full of familiar cars. Patrick sat in the front row of the courtroom with Mom and their lawyer, dressed in a new suit and having gotten a haircut. He looked like a respectable uncle, not someone on the sex offender registry. I recognized aunts, uncles, cousins, and family friends, who stood in clusters, whispering and giving us dark looks as we passed. Mom dabbed her eyes with a tissue, the image of a grieving grandmother. Our side of the courtroom was nearly empty, just us, our lawyer, and, surprisingly, Cheryl. She gave me a small nod as we took our seats. Whatever happened today, I wouldn't let them win. When the judge entered, I gripped my husband's hand. Everything we'd fought for came down to this moment. My daughter's safety was at stake, and I was prepared to fight with everything I had. The judge's gavel struck the bench, and the hearings began. Our lawyer presented the security tape first, which showed Patrick's persistent surveillance of our home. The timestamp suggested a pattern of escalating conduct. Mom's lawyer countered by arguing that a man had the right to jog on public streets. During the first recess, I noticed Beth in the hallway making phone calls, and she kept glancing at me while whispering urgently into her phone. My husband stayed close to me, his hand on my back as we navigated through clusters of hostile relatives. When Mom took the stand, she painted herself as a heartbroken grandmother denied access to her grandchildren. Our lawyer's cross-examination revealed the reality beneath her facade. She showed images of happier times, family gatherings when Patrick played with relatives, and her tears seemed genuine as she detailed how I had torn the family apart. When asked directly about Patrick's conviction, Mom claimed the victim's family had blown things out of proportion, and Patrick had simply been showing affection. Several relatives in the gallery nodded along with her delusions, and the judge ordered a brief recess to review evidence. In the hallway, Dad cornered my husband near the water fountain, and I watched his face turn green as he gestured wildly, clearly attempting to pressure my husband into dropping the case. My husband simply walked away, leaving Dad fuming. Cheryl testified next, bringing printouts of the group chat messages, which Mom's lawyer objected to repeatedly, but the judge allowed them as evidence of coordinated harassment. Cheryl's hands trembled as she read aloud their plans to ambush us at various locations. Patrick took the stand later in the afternoon. Patrick couldn't explain why he'd chosen to jog past our house, and he stumbled when asked about the birthday party intrusion. He'd clearly been coached, speaking softly about rehabilitation and redemption, and claiming he just wanted to be a part of his niece's lives to watch them grow up. His calm demeanor cracked when confronted with the victim impact statement from his case. During the lunch break, I discovered Mom had arranged for several church members to be present. They filled an entire row wearing matching crosses and shooting disapproving looks my way. One woman I recognized from Mom's Bible study group hissed at me in the bathroom. The CPS investigation results were then presented. Patricia herself testified that she'd found no evidence of abuse or neglect, and that the children were thriving and well-adjusted. Mom's lawyer tried to spin this as evidence that the girls needed their extended family, but it fell flat. My testimony came last, and I detailed every incident, every violation of boundaries, and every attempt to manipulate my daughters, as well as the letters they'd sent directly to them. I explained how we'd changed our entire lives to avoid Patrick's stalking. Mom's lawyer accused me of being paranoid and controlling, implying that I was using my children as weapons in a family feud. I remained calm, sticking to facts and documentation. The judge announced that he would review all evidence and make a decision within 3 days. Patrick made his move as we left the courtroom, stepping directly into my path and forcing me to stop. His eyes held a coldness that chilled me, and he leaned close enough for only me to hear his whispered threat about seeing the girls soon. My husband immediately positioned himself between us, and our lawyer documented the interaction. Patrick stepped back with a smirk, rejoining Mom and their attorney. The threat was subtle enough to maintain plausible deniability, but the message was clear. That evening, we found our mailbox stuffed with letters from various relatives condemning our actions and demanding reconciliation. Someone had also left a Bible on our doorstep with specific verses about forgiveness highlighted in yellow. The next morning brought new challenges. Jane's teacher called to report that Beth had shown up at school claiming a family emergency. The school had followed our protocols and denied her access, but Beth had created a scene that upset several students. I drove to the school right away to speak with the principal, who showed me security footage of Beth arguing with the front desk staff and demanding to take the girls for a family emergency. When Beth was denied access to her nieces, she burst into tears. The principal assured me that they would keep a close eye on things, but suggested that we look into another school. The situation was causing havoc, and other parents were concerned. I left feeling defeated, knowing that Mom's campaign was working exactly as intended. At home, I found my husband installing additional cameras around our property. He'd taken the rest of the week off work after Dad showed up there again, this time with Uncle Helen's husband, and they'd attempted to corner him in the parking lot during lunch. Cheryl called that afternoon with disturbing news. The family group chat had turned into planning sessions for after the judge's decision. They talked about filing multiple legal actions to drain our resources, and some suggested showing up at the girls' activities to establish unintentional contact. I spent hours documenting these new threats for our lawyer, and each piece of evidence felt like another weight on my shoulders. The girls sensed the tension, becoming clingy and anxious. Elise had started having nightmares, but she couldn't explain what scared her. Patrick escalated further 2 days after the hearing, when he showed up at the grocery store where I was shopping with the girls. He didn't approach directly, but instead positioned himself where the girls would see him, waving enthusiastically and calling out their names. I rushed the girls out of the store, abandoning our cart. Jane asked why we were leaving without our groceries, and Elise asked why we couldn't talk to Uncle Patrick. Their innocent questions broke my heart as I struggled to explain without frightening them. That night we discovered someone had been in our backyard. Despite the fact that nothing was taken or damaged, our daughter's outdoor toys had been rearranged, their playhouse door was open, and 3 wrapped presents had been left inside. The security cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned during that exact time frame, so my husband called the police while I checked every lock and window. The officers took a report, but explained that without proof of forced entry or footage, there was little they could do. The gifts contained dolls dressed in bathing suits, like the one from Jane's party, and the psychological warfare was taking its toll. I jumped at every sound, checked locks obsessively, and barely slept. My husband began working from home to maintain constant vigilance. We were prisoners in our own lives, exactly what Mom and Patrick wanted. The morning of the judge's decision arrived with a thunderstorm, and we dressed carefully again, preparing for either outcome. I'd arranged for a trusted friend from my mother's group to watch the girls, someone completely disconnected from my family. The courthouse was even busier than before. In the courtroom, Patrick sat between Mom and their lawyer, dressed in a new suit, as if they were attending a wedding rather than attempting to force their children to be near a predator. Mom had rallied additional supporters, including several prominent church members, who wore color-coordinated outfits and carried signs promoting family unity. Mom clutched a handkerchief dramatically as the judge entered with a thick folder of documents and began reviewing the case. It was clear that someone had missed the memo on what family unity entails, as he kept turning to smile at family members who were playing the role of persecuted victim. He mentioned Patrick's completed sentence and rehabilitation programs, as well as the evidence of stalking, coordinated harassment, and a CPS complaint that appeared retaliatory. I felt my heart racing as he talked about the balance between protecting children and maintaining family bonds, citing cases where courts had reunified families after criminal convictions. Every word felt like another step toward losing everything we'd fought for. The judge's decision was mixed, but he did extend the restraining order for a year, citing the stalking behavior and harassment. The security footage showed clear patterns of stalking, the group chat messages showed coordinated harassment, and the birthday party incident demonstrated blatant disregard for boundaries. Mom's side erupted in whispers and movement, while others appeared satisfied with the partial victory, and Patrick's face showed fury beneath his calm facade. However, he granted Mom limited grandparent visitation rights, 1 supervised hour per month at a neutral location, with Patrick barred from attending. Beth stopped us in the hallway as we were about to leave. Our lawyer explained that the restraining order was now more difficult to challenge, and the supervised visitation gave us more control over the situation. We pushed through with our lawyer's assistance, ignoring shouted questions about denying children their family. Security intervened when she grabbed my arm, attempting to force me to listen, and her removal caused another scene of stares and whispers. We had won the main battle, but it had come at a high cost. Mom had her foot in the door now, and Patrick would undoubtedly use her visits to maintain indirect contact. Despite the security cameras, we discovered more gifts on our porch when we arrived home. This time, 3 identical necklaces with heart pendants. The message was clear. Patrick wasn't giving up. He'd simply found new ways to violate boundaries while technically following the court order. That evening, our lawyer called with concerning news. Mom's attorney had already filed paperwork requesting expanded visitation, claiming that the supervised visits were overly restrictive and harmful to the grandmother-grandchild relationship. After the girls had gone to bed, I talked with my husband and discussed our next steps, including relocating, changing schools, and even officially changing our names. It felt impossible to safeguard our daughters while keeping their normal lives. Cheryl texted screenshots from the family chat where they were celebrating Mom's partial victory and strategizing how to use the visit strategically. Some suggested having Patrick unexpectedly appear at the visitation location, while others talked about wearing recording devices to gather evidence against me. The next morning brought new challenges. Jane's best friend's mother called to politely uninvite her from a sleepover because word had spread about the courthouse drama and Patrick's presence on the registry. She was sorry, but she had to think of all the children's safety. I understood her position, but Jane's face crumbled when I explained. My husband's parents, who had remained silent throughout the ordeal, finally called to offer their support, but suggested that we might be handling things too harshly. She couldn't understand why she was being punished for adult problems, and Elise and our youngest became whiny and difficult as a result. Their well-meaning ignorance hurt more than outright hostility. We spent the week establishing new routines around the court orders. I met with the supervised visitation coordinator to establish strict protocols. No gifts, no photos, no messages to relay. Mom would have exactly 60 minutes to visit under professional supervision. The first visit was scheduled for the following week. I carefully prepared the girls, explaining that Grandma would visit them at a special location. They seemed excited but confused about the restrictions. Jane asked if Uncle Patrick would be there as well, and my heart sank at having that conversation again. Meanwhile, Patrick found legal ways to stay in our lives. He volunteered at community events we'd previously attended, and he joined organizations where we had memberships, always keeping the required distance but ensuring we knew he was there. Dad escalated his own campaign, showing up at my husband's workplace despite warnings, waiting in the parking lot with Bible verses and printed articles about forgiveness. Security eventually barred him from the property, but he simply moved to the public sidewalk, and Beth began her own harassment via social media. She created multiple accounts to message our friends, sharing her version of events. She painted me as mentally unstable, claiming I was denying my children loving family relationships. Some friends distanced themselves, unsure what to believe. The stress manifested physically as I developed migraines and insomnia. My husband's blood pressure skyrocketed, and the girls began acting out at school, their grades slipping. We began family therapy, which added to our mounting legal bills, and our lawyer warned us that Mom's team was preparing a larger strategy, hiring a private investigator to document our lives, looking for any ammunition. Every public outing became a potential trap, and every interaction with the girls could be twisted into evidence. One morning, I caught Patrick photographing our house from a legal distance. Cheryl's family group chat revealed their long-term plans, which included waiting out the restraining order while gathering evidence of parental alienation. He made certain I saw him, even waving at the security camera, and he was also documenting everything. We installed panic buttons throughout the house and established code words with the girls. If anyone approached them unexpectedly, they were to find a trusted adult right away. They coached each other on what to document and how to present themselves as victims. The weight of transforming my children into cautious, fearful versions of themselves crushed me every day. A week before the first supervised visit, Mom sent a formal letter through her lawyer requesting permission to bring photo albums to share family history with the girls. When we declined, she accused us of cultural erasure and denying the children their heritage. As the visit approached, Patrick became more assertive and began visiting businesses near the visitation center, establishing legitimate reasons to be there. He couldn't enter during the visit, but he could position himself nearby and the law was on his side. I met with the visitation supervisor to express my concerns, and she assured me that their protocols were strict, but I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. She had dealt with families like ours before, and she knew how determined individuals could circumvent even the best safeguards. None of us slept well the night before the first visit, and the girls sensed our anxiety. Jane frequently inquired if something was wrong. Elise clung to me, and our youngest returned to behaviors she'd outgrown months before. That morning I dressed the girls carefully, wanting them to seem well cared for while not giving Mom any reason to keep them away from her. My hands shook as I braided their hair, and my husband double-checked the recording device our lawyer had permitted us to carry. The visitation center was a converted house designed to feel comfortable while maintaining security, and we came early to familiarize the kids with the surroundings. The supervisor took the girls to the visitation room while we waited in a separate area. Mom arrived on time, dressed impeccably, and carrying a small bag. Her face lit up as she saw the girls through the window, and for a brief moment, I saw the grandmother she could have been if she hadn't chosen Patrick over their safety. I watched on the closed-circuit monitor as Mom hugged them sadly. She had brought approved coloring papers and crayons for 30 minutes, and it appeared to be a normal grandmother visit. Then Mom began her manipulation, talking about missing family events and how sorry everyone was. The supervisor redirected her several times, but Mom was skilled at subtle emotional manipulation. When the visit ended, the girls were confused and upset. They didn't understand why they couldn't see Grandma at her house, or why Uncle Patrick couldn't visit either. The car ride home was filled with questions that I struggled to answer honestly, without further damaging them. That afternoon, our lawyer called. Patrick had filed his own petition claiming defamation and emotional distress, claiming that our false accusations had harmed his reputation and relationships. I'm curious why the judge would grant visitation rights in the face of documented stalking and harassment. It was a clear vindictive move, but fighting it would cost us more money. During the second visit, Mom brought a family scrapbook she had compiled, and the war of attrition continued. Every legal filing drained our savings, every harassment incident shattered our peace, and every manipulation attempt harmed our children's innocence. The supervisor had accepted it after checking for objectionable content, but Mom had been clever. She'd included images of Patrick at every family milestone, portraying him as the beloved uncle the girls were missing. Our lawyer filed a motion to dismiss the defamation lawsuit, but the judge allowed it to proceed to discovery, which included depositions and documents. The girls absorbed every word, their confusion growing. When they returned to the waiting area, Jane immediately asked why Uncle Patrick couldn't attend the visits if he was so nice. Patrick's strategy was clear: he drained us financially while maintaining his victim narrative. The family's coordination reached new heights, as various relatives began to show up at the girls' activities. An aunt would show up at dance class, a cousin at soccer practice, and they maintained legal distance while making their presence felt. Other parents began to notice the pattern of family members lurking around. Cheryl continued to feed me information from the group chat. They developed a rotation schedule to maintain constant pressure without any individual violating the restraining order. They documented every sighting of us, building what they called their alienation portfolio. 3 weeks after the court decision, I discovered Mom had enrolled in the same gym where I took yoga classes. She attended different sessions, but I always saw her in the parking lot. The girls' behavior deteriorated further. Jane became withdrawn and stopped inviting friends over. Elisa's nightmares worsened, but she still couldn't explain what scared her, and our youngest began having tantrums reminiscent of her toddler years. The family therapist suggested that the constant tension was affecting them more than we realized. Patrick's current strategy was escalated when he got a job at a hardware store 2 blocks from the visitation center, giving him a legitimate reason to be in the area during every visit. I noticed his truck parked strategically where we'd have to pass it entering and leaving, and Mom pushed the boundaries even further during the 3rd supervised visit. She gave each girl a locket with family photos inside, including Patrick. The supervisor forced her to remove them, but the damage had already been done. The girls didn't understand why they couldn't keep Grandma's gifts. Our financial situation deteriorated due to legal fees, therapy costs, and security measures. My husband took on extra shifts while I freelanced from home to avoid leaving the girls with sitters, and the stress showed in both of our faces, with dark circles becoming permanent fixtures. Then came the accident, or what appeared to be an accident. I was backing out of a parking space at the grocery store when another car hit me, and the driver jumped out, apologizing profusely. Only when I saw Uncle Helen's son did I realize this was orchestrated. The deposition for Patrick's defamation case was scheduled for the following month, and our lawyer prepared me for grueling questions designed to make me appear unstable. They'd use every family incident, every protective measure, as evidence of my irrational behavior. Toward a reformed man, he insisted on calling the cops and creating an official report that painted me as distracted and careless. Mom's visitation requests increased. She petitioned for unsupervised visits, citing the successful supervised sessions, and included affidavits from family members attesting to her character and my unreasonable restrictions. Each filing required a response, which cost money we didn't have. I began noticing cars following me on errands, different vehicles, but always maintaining the same careful distance. When I mentioned it to our lawyer, he said proving coordination would be nearly impossible. They'd learned from the group chat evidence to be more careful. The 4th supervised visit brought new manipulation. Mom spent the entire hour telling the girls about family traditions they were missing: birthday parties, holiday gatherings, summer barbecues, all of which were portrayed as magical events stolen from them. Patrick began jogging past the visitation center during our visits, timing it perfectly to cross our path, and waving at the girls through the window while maintaining legal distance. The supervisor documented it, but technically he wasn't violating any orders. Our home became a fortress of anxiety. Patrick's lawyer interrogated me for 6 hours, questioning me about every decision I'd made since his release. I struggled to explain why we lived as if we were hiding without frightening them or poisoning them against the family they still loved. We added more cameras, window sensors, and kept the curtains drawn at all times. They portrayed my protective measures as paranoid delusions, and my documentation as obsessive behavior. I kept my cool, but inside I was cracking. 2 days later, Jane's teacher called with concerns. Jane had written a story about a family torn apart by a mean mother who wouldn't let anyone visit, and the teacher recognized the emotional distress and suggested additional counseling. Another expense, another acknowledgement of how this war was harming my children. Mom's next action was calculated. She began attending the same church we'd shifted to, and after leaving hers, she sat across the sanctuary, dabbing at tears during services. Churchgoers who didn't know our tale saw a grandma split from her grandchildren, and some began avoiding us. My husband suggested borrowing from his 401k, but I knew that would only delay the inevitable. Patrick had hired a second attorney, someone known for aggressive litigation, and the message was clear. They could afford to escalate, whereas we couldn't. During the fifth supervised visit, something shifted, and Mom dropped her careful facade for a brief moment. When the supervisor stepped out briefly to use the restroom, Mom quickly whispered something to the girls. I couldn't hear it through the monitor, but I saw their faces change. Jane looked scared, and Elise was confused in the car. Afterward, neither girl would tell me what Grandma had said. They exchanged glances but remained silent. That night, I found them huddled together in Jane's bed, whispering. When I entered, they immediately stopped talking. The secret Mom had planned. Patrick filed additional motions in his defamation case, claiming lost wages from jobs he couldn't get due to my slander, and requesting access to my social media accounts, email records, and personal journals. Our lawyer fought each request, but judges frequently favored broad discovery, and the family's pressure campaign evolved. Instead of making direct contact, they started a whisper campaign in our community, sending anonymous letters to parents at school, calling local businesses to question our mental stability, and gradually shrinking our world. Cheryl warned me that Mom was planning something for the holidays, and the group chat was filled with cryptic references to Christmas justice and reunion planning. The sixth supervised visit was scheduled for December 23rd, and Mom arrived with a bag of wrapped presents that the supervisor had to inspect. Each gift was appropriate, including books, puzzles, and art supplies, but each contained subtle reminders of what the girls were missing. That evening, I discovered why the girls had been secretive. Elise finally broke down and told me what Grandma had whispered. Uncle Patrick had gifts for them hidden at her house, special gifts he'd made himself, and they could have them if they could persuade Mommy to let them visit. The manipulation was masterful, and my children now had a secret with their grandmother. They didn't understand why I was being mean about presents, and Jane accused me of ruining Christmas. On Christmas Eve, we discovered 3 packages on our doorstep, left at 3 a.m. by someone in dark clothing who knew exactly where our blind spots were. Inside were handmade dolls clearly crafted with patience and skill, as evidenced by the security cameras. The card simply said, "Love, Uncle Patrick," in neat handwriting. I wanted to throw them away, but the girls had already seen them. Taking the dolls would make me the villain who stole Christmas presents, and keeping them indicated Patrick had successfully invaded our home once more. My husband and I exchanged worried glances over the girls' heads as they opened their presents on Christmas morning, clearly thinking about the dolls in the garage and the mysterious gifts at Grandma's house. I made a compromise and put them in the garage, promising that we'd figure it out later. The day after Christmas, our lawyer called with bad news. The judge in Patrick's defamation case had partially ruled in his favor, dismissing the wage loss claims but finding that I had potentially damaged his reputation beyond the scope of protecting my children, and a trial would determine damages. I sat in my kitchen, staring at the legal documents, because we couldn't afford a trial. The retainer alone would bankrupt us. Mom and Patrick had won their war of financial attrition. I had to make an impossible choice: surrender or lose everything fighting. That night, I found my husband in the garage, looking at the dolls Patrick had made, each of which was crafted with disturbing detail and dressed like our daughters. The implications made my skin crawl, but legally they were just gifts from an uncle, and we had no proof of sinister intent. The next morning, Jane's best friend's mother called to say they were switching schools. The drama surrounding our family had become too much, and other parents were considering doing the same. During the 7th supervised visit, I instructed our lawyer to offer a settlement in Patrick's defamation case, despite the fact that the number made me sick. As I watched Mom manipulate my daughters with practiced ease, seeing their growing resentment toward me, and feeling the financial news tightening, I realized I had to change tactics. I couldn't win by playing defense anymore. Despite the fact that we didn't have $30,000, the settlement came with conditions Patrick couldn't refuse, including a permanent no-contact agreement that went beyond the restraining order. Patrick accepted the settlement, probably thinking he'd find a way around it later, and we had to liquidate our retirement accounts to pay for it. Despite the fact that it felt like paying a ransom to a kidnapper, Mom's reaction was swift and vicious. She filed for expanded visitation rights, claiming the settlement proved I'd been wrong about Patrick, but our lawyer had anticipated this, and the settlement included Patrick's acknowledgement that continued contact could be detrimental to the children's well-being. The judge who reviewed Mom's petition saw through her manipulation. He observed a pattern of escalating behavior, coordinated harassment, and the use of supervised visits to undermine parental authority. Instead of expanding access, he reduced it to quarterly visits with stricter supervision. Mom's investment in Patrick had cost her everything, including her retirement savings, relationship with her grandchildren, and now her limited access. The family group chat erupted in rage and disbelief, and Cheryl sent me screenshots of their outburst. Some blamed Mom for pushing too hard, while others blamed Patrick for taking the money. The coalition that had terrorized us for months had fractured into bitter factions, and we used the breathing room to rebuild. Jane's school agreed to put in more security measures. We found a new therapist who specialized in family manipulation dynamics, and we gradually, carefully, began explaining the age-appropriate truth to the girls about why Uncle Patrick couldn't be around them. The quarterly visits with Mom became less traumatic, and with stricter supervision and reduced frequency, she couldn't maintain the same manipulation. The girls began to see her as a distant relative rather than a central figure in their lives. It wasn't ideal, but it was manageable. 6 months later, Patrick violated the no-contact agreement by sending birthday cards to each girl through a third party. Our lawyer immediately filed for contempt, and this time, the judge had no patience. Patrick faced jail time or a substantial fine, which he chose, further draining Mom's resources because she was still funding his legal battles. The extended family eventually fled, without Mom's money to fund their campaign, and with legal barriers entrenched, most found it simpler to move on. A few remained, but their individual efforts lacked the coordinated impact of the group onslaught. On the anniversary of Patrick's release, I sat in my backyard watching my daughters play. We'd paid a terrible price: financial ruin, family destruction, months of terror, but they were safe. Their innocence was scarred, but not shattered. My husband joined me, bringing coffee. We didn't need words. We'd survived by choosing the battles we could win and accepting the costs of those we couldn't. The war wasn't over. As I hugged them close, I reflected on the cost of protection. It would never be perfect, but we'd accomplished what was most important. The girls ran up to us, their faces beaming with joy. They'd adapted to our new normal with the resilience of children, and they now understood why some family members weren't safe, why love sometimes meant keeping distance. Every parent would pay it without hesitation, but few understood the true cost until the bill came due. We'd paid in money, relationships, and innocence. But watching my daughters play safely in our yard, I knew I'd pay it again. The restraining order would need to be renewed eventually. Mom would get her quarterly visits, and Patrick would most likely probe for new weaknesses, but for the time being my daughters are safe. I found it strange how the mother aged so much when she lost. Was she actually believing she was doing the right thing, or was this all about control from the start? Sometimes the only triumph that matters is surviving each struggle and preserving what you love most. I said no to my brother's request. So my parents left my son alone at church, while my wife gave birth to our daughter. Now I took them to court. Hi, my name is Levi. I am 32 years old and live in Atlanta with my wife and 2 children. To this day, I vividly recall the early days after Henry and I married. 4 years prior, we met at Georgia Tech, where I was studying engineering, and she was pursuing her nursing degree. After 4 years of dating, we got married in the spring of 2018. After the wedding, we rented a 2-story house in the Atlanta suburbs. It has a large backyard and was situated in a safe neighborhood for children. Our son Logan was born in 2019. He inherited his mother's blue eyes and a cheerful smile that always warmed my heart. Logan became the source of my greatest delight and significance from the beginning. Logan's early years were pleasant. My parents, Elijah and Scarlett, were frequent visitors who adored their grandchild. They would bring toys, read him stories, and occasionally ask to keep him overnight so Henry and I could spend time together. Scarlett would often tell Logan in a loving tone, "You are the pride of our family." Logan would giggle and run into her arms whenever he heard that. When Logan turned 5, Henry and I discussed having another child. We both wanted Logan to have a sibling to play with and learn how to share. A few months later, Henry informed me that she was pregnant with our second kid, which made me even happier. I honestly believed that our lives were ideal at the time, and I could not have wished for anything more. To help you understand the later dispute, let me tell you about Mateo, my younger brother, who is 4 years younger than me. Mateo was spoiled by our parents in ways that I never had the opportunity to experience. When Mateo was 10 and wanted to study the piano, our parents immediately signed him up for pricey, top-tier lessons that cost thousands of dollars. But when I was 14 and sought to join the school soccer team, they declined because it was too expensive. When I asked why, Elijah just answered, "Levi, you're the older brother. You need to understand and make sacrifices for your sibling." That moment taught me my first lesson about giving things up for Mateo. Mateo was knowledgeable and gifted with words, but he lacked consistency in all he did. He began studying business in college but quit out midway to pursue his passion. After that, he experimented with many careers, including photography, graphic design, and web marketing. When Mateo failed at something, Scarlett would respond, Matteo just hasn't found the right job yet. He needs more time. When I heard those statements, I felt worried about favoritism. Matteo launched a tiny coffee business in downtown Atlanta in 2020 at the age of 24. He arrived at my place one Saturday evening, his eyes full of excitement. Matteo exclaimed eagerly, "Levi, I've got a great business idea. I want to open a European-style cafe." When I heard that, I asked, "How much do you need to get started?" Matteo responded as if he had rehearsed it. "I need you to loan me $8,000. I promise I'll pay you back within a year." Even though I felt awful about it, I agreed to help, thinking Matteo had finally found some direction. As a result, the coffee business operated for 6 months before closing, owing to financial difficulties. Later, when I inquired about repayment, Matteo responded, "I'm struggling right now. Can I pay it off gradually?" That's when I understood Matteo probably never intended to repay me in the first place. 2 years later, Matteo got into more difficulty, this time with credit cards. He owed $5,000 and was facing a probable lawsuit from the bank. He approached me again with begging eyes. Matteo replied in a panicked voice, "I need your help this time. I swear this is the last time." I realized I was making a mistake at the time, but I consented nonetheless since I didn't want Matteo to be sued. In just 4 years, I had loaned Matteo $13,000 and never received a single dollar back. When Henry inquired about the money, I would respond, "Family has to help each other." But deep down, I was growing bored of playing the part of the decent elder brother that I had been trapped with for 28 years. The family turmoil began a little more than a year ago, and it all started with my younger brother. I recall it clearly. Matteo came to my house on a Saturday afternoon in March 2024, his eyes blazing from having recently learned the secret to becoming wealthy. Logan was playing in the living room when this happened. Logan hugged Uncle Matteo immediately upon seeing him, exclaiming, "Uncle Matteo, I missed you so much." Matteo grinned as he patted Logan's head. "I missed you too. You've grown so much." After Logan returned to play, Matteo sat on the sofa and began discussing his latest idea. Matteo remarked confidently, "Levi, this time I found a real business opportunity. I want to start a transportation company." When I heard that, a shiver went down my spine. I inquired, "Do you have any experience in the transportation industry?" After a moment's reflection, Matteo responded, "I've done my research. This industry is booming, especially after the pandemic, when people started shopping online more." He claimed that he had found a business partner, written a detailed business plan, and begun negotiating with a few possible clients. On paper, everything seemed ideal. At the end of the conversation, Matteo asked, "I need $75,000 to get started. I already have $25,000 saved. Can you help me with the rest?" When I heard the sum and the request, I sighed and said, "Matteo, that's a lot of money. I need some time to think about it." Matteo nodded in answer, but I could see the disappointment in his eyes. Matteo contacted about a month later with some wonderful news. He told me he had received a bank loan and had formally established his business. At that point, I congratulated my brother and silently prayed that this time he would succeed. For the first 3 months, Matteo was overjoyed with his new business. He purchased 2 second-hand vehicles, recruited 2 drivers, and started accepting orders. Everything appeared to be going fine. However, by the 4th month, I began hearing Matteo grumble about issues like his growing gasoline prices, late customer payments, and one of the drivers unexpectedly resigning. Matteo remarked, "Things aren't going the way I expected. I'm facing some financial trouble." Hearing that, I felt genuinely sad for him. By the 5th month, Matteo revealed that his company was suffering significant losses. He owed money to the bank, fuel suppliers, and the last remaining driver for unpaid salaries. Then, on a Sunday evening in October, Matteo arrived at my place, exhausted, with red eyes, and little trace of his former confidence. Matteo admitted, shaking, "I failed. The company's about to go bankrupt, and I don't know what to do." After those remarks, I felt horrible for Matteo, and I knew he was ready to ask for something I couldn't provide. After a brief pause, Matteo glanced at me and stated, "Levi, I need you to lend me $50,000 to save the company and pay off my debts." As soon as he said those words, I felt a tightening in my chest. $50,000 wasn't a small sum, especially considering Henry and I were saving for the arrival of our second child. I replied honestly and forcefully, "Matteo, I've helped you many times, but I can't do it this time." Matteo's demeanor altered when I told him no. His face flushed and his tone became sharper. Mateo said angrily, "You're doing well financially and still stingy with your brother. Do you have any idea the hell I'm living through?" I attempted to remain composed and explained, "Mateo, I've helped you with $28,000 over the past 4 years and haven't seen a single dollar back. I have my own family and responsibilities too." Mateo rose up and approached me, his eyes full with hate. He sighed. "You're bringing up old debts while I'm struggling? You're seriously counting pennies with your brother?" At that point, I understood Mateo never really saw me as his brother. To him, I was simply an ATM. I raised my voice. "You need to learn to stand alone, Mateo. I can't keep saving you forever. You're 28 now." When Mateo heard that, he laughed bitterly and added, "Fine, you'll see. I'll tell Mom and Dad about this. They'll see what kind of person you are." Mateo turned around and left the home, slamming the door behind him. After he had departed, I sat down and held my head. Henry emerged from the kitchen with a troubled expression. She sat next to me and asked, "Are you okay?" I glanced at her and replied, "I think I just lost a brother." Henry placed her arms around me and said, "You did the right thing. We can't sacrifice our family's happiness for someone who doesn't appreciate it." At that point, I felt her support and knew I had made the correct decision. My mother, Scarlett, contacted me 3 days after our dispute with Mateo. As soon as I took up the phone, she began speaking without greeting me. "Levi, I heard from Mateo that you refused to help him. I want to know what's going on." I sighed and stated, "Mom, I've already helped Mateo so many times. I can't lend him $50,000 this time." A few seconds later, Scarlett responded in a scolding tone. "Family is supposed to support each other in tough times. Mateo is going through a crisis, and you're selfish." When I heard that, a slow-burning rage erupted within me. I replied, "Do you even know I gave Mateo $13,000 and never got a single cent back?" She kept quiet for a bit and then said, "Money doesn't matter as much as brotherhood. You're well off now and still keeping score with your brother." After hearing it, I knew I couldn't continue the conversation. I said goodbye and hung up. About 2 hours later, my father, Elijah, called in a frigid voice. Elijah said, "Levi, you've disappointed me. You only care about your wife and have forgotten your real family." Those comments caused my heart to halt for a second. I attempted to explain. "Dad, I haven't forgotten my family, but I also have responsibilities to my wife and kids." Following a brief silence, Elijah responded, "Mateo is your brother. If he goes bankrupt, you'll blame him for not helping." And with that, he hung up before I could answer. After the call, I sat in my living room, feeling empty. Henry was working the overnight shift at the hospital. Logan had already fallen asleep, and I felt more alone than ever. 2 days later, Scarlett called again. This time her tone was milder but still forceful. She said, "Levi, I don't want our family to fall apart over money. Please reconsider." Hearing that, I responded forcefully, "Mom, I've decided I can't keep rescuing Mateo forever." Scarlett fell silent as soon as I said those words. Then she said something that sent shivers down my spine. "If you don't help Mateo, don't expect us to forget this." At that point, I recognized I was at a crossroads. Either I remained a slave to my family, or I ventured to draw the line. Henry's 8th month of pregnancy began in September 2024. Despite the tensions within my own family, I attempted to concentrate on preparing for the arrival of our new baby. Logan was ecstatic about the prospect of becoming a big brother. Every night before bed, he would put his hand on Henry's belly and chat to his little sister. Logan would frequently say with an innocent voice, "Baby, I'm waiting for you to come out so we can play together." Henry would grin and softly massage Logan's head during these times. Times like that helped me forget about the stress surrounding Mateo and my parents. We had decorated the baby's room in soft pinks, purchased all of the necessities, and even allowed Logan help select his sister's first toys. During that time, Elijah and Scarlett called sometimes but never longer mentioned Mateo. Instead, they inquired about Henry's pregnancy and expressed interest in Logan. On a weekend evening, Scarlett called and said, "I want to visit Logan. I miss him so much." When I heard it, I felt relieved, as if everything was finally behind us. I agreed to allow my folks to visit the next weekend. When Elijah and Scarlett arrived, they brought Logan gifts and appeared really happy. They inquired about Henry, played with Logan, and even helped make dinner. Seeing the family so joyful, I thought we might have made it through the crisis. But I had no idea our family was about to confront an awful storm. About 2 months later, while I was getting ready for work on a Monday morning, Henry screamed from the bathroom. I went in and found her clutching her stomach, her face twisted in misery. I knew the baby was on the way right then. We went directly to the hospital. When we arrived, the nurses swiftly led Henry to the delivery room. The doctor inspected her and informed us that the baby will be born in a few hours. While waiting for Henry to give birth, I suddenly recalled something important. We needed to pick up Logan from school that afternoon. Right away I remembered my folks. I needed their help. Without hesitation I called Elijah. When I inquired if they could pick up Logan, they immediately said yes. My father told me, "Don't worry about anything, just focus on Henry at the hospital, we'll take care of Logan." Hearing that made me feel extremely grateful. Nothing was more important in such an urgent situation than having family support. After I hung up with my father, I quickly contacted Logan's school to let them know that his grandparents would be picking him up instead of us. The teacher acknowledged the news and wished Henry a smooth delivery. My daughter, Sophia, was delivered at 2:30 p.m. after 6 hours of labor and weighed 3.2 kilograms. She was in good health, with blue eyes like her mother and silky blonde hair. I couldn't fight back my tears when the doctor placed Sophia in my arms. I whispered to Henry, shaking with emotion, "Thank you for giving me such a beautiful gift." Henry grinned, fatigued but thrilled. I called my folks to let them know Henry and Sophia had been transferred into a standard room. I said excitedly, "Sophia's here, the baby is healthy and doing well." Scarlett exclaimed enthusiastically, "Oh my God, we have another granddaughter." Following that call, I reminded them to pick up Logan that afternoon. They confirmed their memory and said they'd take Logan to the hospital that evening to see his little sister. I instantly thanked them, unaware that just a few hours later, I would experience something I would never forget for the rest of my life. Around 6 p.m., when I hadn't heard from my parents to confirm they had picked up Logan, I called them. However, after nearly 20 calls to my mother and father, no one responded. Nobody responded to my messages either. At that point, I was overcome with emotion. I was nervous, restless, and filled with dread. By 6:30, while I was still attempting to reach home, my phone rang unexpectedly from an unknown number. When I answered the phone, I heard a calm male voice speak. "Hello, this is Pastor Williams. I'm looking for Mr. Levi Morrison." The instant I heard that, my heart almost stopped. I responded, "Yes, this is Levi." "What's going on, Pastor?" Pastor Williams immediately responded with concern in his voice. "We found a boy named Logan sitting alone in the church. He has a wristband with your name and phone number on it." At that point, it felt like my entire universe had crumbled around me. "My son is there. Is he hurt?" I nearly yelled. After a few seconds, Pastor Williams said, "He's not hurt, but he's terrified and has been crying a lot." With my voice cracking, I said, "Pastor, I'm on my way. Please don't let anyone take my son away." Pastor Williams instantly responded, "We'll wait for you. He's safe here." After I hung up the phone, I turned to Henry and said, "My parents left Logan at a church. I need to go get him now." Henry burst into tears at hearing this. How could they do that to Logan? I kissed her forehead and told her, "Stay here with Sophia. I'll get Logan home right away." About 30 minutes later, I arrived at the church. Those 30 minutes seemed to go forever. When I arrived, Pastor Williams was waiting at the main entrance. He appeared to be in his 50s, with a gentle face and concern-filled eyes. He spotted me and said, "Mr. Levi, the boy is in my office." I walked into the office and saw Logan curled up in a huge chair, clutching the teddy bear Henry had given him. His eyes were red from sobbing, his hair was messed up, and his clothing were disheveled. Logan ran into my arms as he saw me and sobbed. "Daddy, I was so scared. Grandma and Grandpa said you didn't love me anymore." Hearing those words, I clutched Logan close and felt my heart break into 1,000 pieces. At that point, I realized I'd never be able to forgive my parents for what they had done. After returning Logan to the hospital and assuring that he had calmed down, I approached my parents immediately. It was nearly 10 p.m., but I couldn't wait until the morning. I drove to their house, filled with wrath. When I arrived, I rang the doorbell repeatedly until Elijah opened it. He did not seem shocked to see me. When I spotted him, I shouted, "How could you do that to Logan? He's only 6 years old." Elijah looked at me coldly and said, You prioritized money before family. Scarlett entered from the living room with a frigid expression and said, I raised you for 32 years. Now you know what it feels like to lose one. As soon as those words left his mouth, I felt as if someone had put a knife straight into my chest. If you don't help your brother when he's in need, I won't care about your child. Hearing that, I felt as if I were standing before two strangers. With rage in my voice, I demanded, Logan is your grandson. How could you use a child to exact revenge? Elijah replied coldly, We merely wanted to teach you the value of family, but you're too selfish to comprehend. At that time, I understood the folks in front of me were no longer the parents I had known. After a few seconds, I looked them both in the eyes and declared, From this day forward, I shall consider myself parentless, and I will take you to court for child abandonment. When I finished speaking, Elijah exclaimed, You're taking your parents to court. Go ahead and do it. I turned around and exited the house, slamming the door behind me. Inside, I knew I had recently lost my biological family, but I also knew I needed to defend my own. At that moment, I felt both deep pain and a strong feeling of resolution. Logan would never experience anything like this again. When I arrived at the hospital about midnight, Henry was still awake. She sat alongside the bed, cradling Logan while he slept in her arms. Henry glanced up and inquired in a worried tone, How did it go? I sat alongside her and told her everything about my encounter with my parents. Henry appeared stunned by what she had just heard. She said nothing. She simply gripped Logan even more. Henry called her parents the next morning to explain what had transpired. Henry's parents, Thomas and Linda, were left speechless after hearing the account. Thomas then stated, We're driving up immediately. We can't let this go. Thomas and Linda arrived at the hospital that afternoon. Thomas was a retired engineer, and Linda had worked as an elementary school teacher. They were both wonderful folks who cared greatly for their family. When Linda spotted Logan, she wrapped her arms around him and said, Sweetheart, Grandma and Grandpa will protect you. Logan grinned and ran into her arms. Thomas sat alongside me and said, Levi, we can't believe your parents would do such a thing to a 6-year-old. That's not something people with hearts would ever do. Hearing those things made me feel better because I knew some people understood and supported me. After that, Linda continued, We'll support you through the legal process. This can't be ignored. Hearing her say that, I felt like a light had finally broken through the darkness. In the following days, Thomas and Linda stayed in Atlanta to assist our family. They cared for Logan while Henry recovered from childbirth, and I handled the legal matters. With his grandparents around, Logan gradually regained trust. They read him stories, played with him, and made him feel loved. Logan looked at me one evening and said, Daddy, why don't Grandma and Grandpa love me as much as Nana and Papa? Hearing that, I pulled Logan close and whispered, Sweetheart, not everyone knows how to love the right way, but Daddy, Mommy and your grandparents on Mommy's side will always love you with all our hearts. Logan nodded and leaned against me. Mateo called me 2 days after we were released from the hospital, and as soon as I picked up the phone he said, Levi, I just heard from Mom and Dad about what happened with Logan. At that point, I realized that true family isn't about shared blood, but about the people who stand by you and protect you when things get tough. I can't believe it. When I heard that, I got angry and questioned him. Did you know they were planning to do this? Mateo responded truthfully. I swear I had no idea. I merely complained to them about your refusal to help. I never imagined they'd go that far. Mateo inquired how Logan was doing and checked in on Henry and the new baby, and I could tell he was telling the truth. After the call, I felt a little comforted since Mateo expressed genuine contrition and appeared to accept responsibility for what had transpired. At that moment, I realized Mateo could have finally learnt the most essential lesson of his life. Our actions can have a huge impact on the innocent. The following Monday, with financial assistance from Thomas and Linda, I first met with Jennifer Martinez, a 45-year-old attorney with 20 years of experience in child protection and family law cases. Jennifer had sharp eyes but a deep compassion as she listened to my story. Jennifer stated, This is one of the most serious cases I've seen. Using a child for personal revenge is unacceptable. Hearing that gave me reassurance, so I said, Do we have enough evidence to file a lawsuit? A few seconds later, Jennifer said, We have Pastor Williams' testimony, and we may be able to obtain surveillance footage from the church. I'll reach out to get the recordings. Jennifer spent the next week gathering evidence, and Pastor Williams agreed to cooperate and provide a detailed statement describing Logan's condition when he was found. At the same time, the church's security camera captured footage of Elijah and Scarlett dropping Logan off at 5 p.m., and they left without saying anything to the church staff. Watching the video, I saw Logan run for them, only to be gently pushed back by Scarlett, who begged him to stay still. That moment shattered my heart into 1,000 pieces. Jennifer also received psychological records from Logan's doctor, which revealed that Logan was experiencing stress and anxiety as a result of the incident. After 2 weeks of preparation, Jennifer filed a lawsuit against Elijah and Scarlett, accusing them of child endangerment, emotional abuse, and abandonment. When Elijah and Scarlett received notice of the complaint, they hired an attorney and attempted to refute all of the charges. Later, their lawyer phoned Jennifer to advise resolving the case quietly, but I declined. At that point, I informed Jennifer, "I want this resolved in court. No one should be allowed to harm a child without facing the consequences." Jennifer nodded in agreement, and we proceeded with the case. The trial was held at Fulton County Court 3 months later, and because of the gravity of the situation, several local reporters were present to cover the proceedings. I sat in the front row with Thomas and Linda that day, and Logan was not permitted to attend to protect his emotional well-being. Henry remained at home to care for Sophia. Elijah and Scarlett sat on the opposite side with their attorney, and I observed that they both avoided looking at us. The case was presided over by Judge Patricia Henderson, a 55-year-old woman with 25 years of experience in family court. Jennifer began the trial with a forceful statement. "Your Honor, this case is not solely about child abandoning. It is about manipulating an innocent youngster to exact personal vendetta." Hearing Jennifer speak encouraged me that taking them to court was the correct decision. Following that, Elijah and Scarlett's attorney attempted to defend them. "Your Honor, my clients merely wished to teach their kid the importance of family. They had no intention of harming their grandson." As soon as the statement ended, Jennifer stood and answered aggressively. "Your Honor, abandoning a 6-year-old child in a public place cannot be considered a life lesson." Pastor Williams was asked to testify, and he recounted Logan's condition when he was discovered in detail. Following that, the church's security tape was shown in court, and the scene of Logan chasing after his grandparents only to be left behind moved many people in the audience to tears. My brother Mateo was then called to the stand. He admitted to pressuring our parents but insisted he was unaware of their plan. Logan's psychologist also presented findings on the emotional impact of the incident on him. And finally, Elijah and Scarlett were called to defend themselves, continuing to justify their actions. My mother went on, "We only wanted Levi to understand that family matters more than money." Hearing those remarks pained her greatly since she still couldn't recognize the damage she had done. After both sides had presented their cases, Judge Henderson ordered a 30-minute respite before giving her verdict. When the court began, she read the ruling in a harsh tone. The court concludes that the defendants committed child abandonment and caused significant psychological harm. The court sentences Elijah and Scarlett Morrison to 18 months probation each, a $15,000 fine, and 3 years of no contact with their grandson, Logan Morrison. Hearing the verdict felt like a huge weight had been taken off my shoulders. I knew Logan was secure, and justice had been served. 1 month after the trial, we chose to stay in Atlanta, but we radically changed our way of life. Rather than fleeing sad memories, we created new ones in the same house. Henry quit her job at the hospital to care for our 2 children. Henry spoke gently to Logan, saying, "From now on, Mommy will be home with you and baby Sophia every day." Logan held Henry firmly and shouted, "I love having Mommy at home." Thomas and Linda then relocated to Atlanta to be closer to us. They sold their old home and purchased a new one only 15 minutes away, devoting all of their devotion to their 2 grandkids. Logan spent every weekend at their house, where Thomas taught him how to ride a bike and helped him in the garden, while Linda read stories and cooked Logan's favorite foods. Linda frequently told Logan, "Grandma and Grandpa adore you and Sophia more than anything. You two mean everything to us." Logan smiled broadly and responded, "I love you too, Grandma and Grandpa." Logan adored his newborn sister and was always willing to assist us in caring for her. Every day, Sophia developed a bit more and became the new delight of our family. He would frequently report her minor milestones, saying, "Daddy, Sophia smiled at me." In moments like that, I would tell him, "You're an amazing big brother." Mateo, my younger brother, still called occasionally to check in, but he had become more independent. Eventually, he found a stable job at a logistics company in Atlanta and repaid the money he owed me in monthly installments. I remember the first month, when he paid me $500, he said, "I have learned my lesson. I will repay you, and never cause anyone grief again." After hearing it, I thought my brother had matured. We entirely cut off contact with Elijah and Scarlett. They tried to call and even requested relatives to intervene, but I held firm in my decision. Even when some family members said, "Levi, no matter what, they're still your parents," I was ready to respond. Real parents would never hurt their children or grandchildren. Logan totally recovered and became a joyous, brilliant little boy, while Sophia grew up healthy and brought fun to our home every day. In the months that followed, life in Atlanta became much more tranquil and happy. About 3 months later, we renovated the house, repainted the walls, and replaced the furniture to create a more positive and refreshing space. And most importantly, we filled the home with love from our small family and grandparents, who never left us. Every evening, when both kids had gone to bed, Henry and I would sit in the backyard, sipping coffee and talking about the future. She would occasionally ask if I ever regretted my decision, and in those instances, I would always respond firmly, "No." That is the end of my story. What do you think? Was I wrong to take my parents to court? Please leave your thoughts in the comment section below. I sincerely want to hear from you. You don't need all this space. My sister illegally moved in with 3 kids using a spare key, so I called the cops and had them thrown out. Hello Reddit. I am Charlotte, a 32-year-old female from Texas, and I feel like I have spent the majority of my life in the shadow of my older sister Ella. She's 3 years older than me, and she has always been my favorite. You know the type: smart, outgoing, and capable of charming her way out of any situation. Meanwhile, I've been the responsible one, which appears to be code for the person who does all of the work but receives no credit. Growing up, Ella always had the best of everything. Birthdays? Hers were massive outdoor celebrations, complete with bounce castles and pony rides. Mine? A pizza party in the dining room featuring a cake from the grocery store bakery. Christmas? Ella recibió la Barbie dream house. I purchased a used copycat with a missing elevator. My parents would simply say, "You don't need all of that fancy stuff," or, "Be grateful for what you have, Charlotte." And I was. I couldn't help but notice that Ella's thanks was never expected in the same manner. But the actual disparity struck me when I started college. I had worked hard in high school, juggling AP classes and extracurricular activities to maintain a high GPA. I had been accepted to a nearby institution and believed I had a strong plan. I'd commute from home to save dorm fees. Ella had attended her dream school, and my parents had funded everything. I imagined they'd help me too, right? Wrong. When I mentioned my plan to live at home, my mother looked at me as if I had just suggested we relocate to Mars. "If you're staying here, you'll need to contribute," she added casually. "Ella got a full ride from us because she deserved it. You need to learn responsibility." I could not believe it. I was 18 and preparing to enter college, and they were already talking about me paying rent. Contribute turned out to be $400 per month for rent and electricity, with the additional requirement that I buy my own groceries. That may not seem like much unless you're a broke college student working part-time at a bookstore for $9 per hour. I attempted to argue. I told them how they had covered everything for Ella and how she never had to worry about money at school. Mom simply shrugged. "We gave Ella what she needed," she stated. "You're different. You're independent. You'll figure it out." So I did. I worked as many hours as I could at the bookshop, occasionally skipping meals to make ends meet. I'd pass past the campus coffee shop every morning, envious of the students who could afford lattes and pastries. Meanwhile, I was brown bagging peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and drinking free coffee from the bookshop break room. I don't believe I purchased a single textbook at full price. I acquired all of mine used or borrowed from the library. Every month, I handed over the $400 to my parents while Ella was away at her out-of-state school, living in a brand new dorm that my parents had purchased for. She contacted me once to complain about her dorm's AC not being chilly enough, and I almost lost it. I didn't have air conditioning in my automobile since I couldn't afford to fix it. My parents continue to send Ella money every month. I once overheard Mom on the phone saying, "We don't want her to struggle. College is difficult enough." I stood in the kitchen, holding my $1 ramen noodles, wondering why no one had ever shown me compassion. To make matters worse, my parents were continually praising Ella for her accomplishments. She earned a 3.2 GPA in her communications program, and they threw her a lavish graduation party complete with a catered buffet and a DJ. When I graduated with a 3.9 GPA and a computer science degree, we had a peaceful meal at home. Mom prepared lasagna and replied, "Well, we don't want to make a fuss." Looking back, I believe what hurt the most was not a lack of financial assistance. The message was clear. I didn't matter as much. While I was only present, Ella was always portrayed as the star, the one with potential. Even when I achieved it, it was overlooked. "Charlotte's smart. She doesn't need help," they'd say. It seemed like being capable was a curse. After college, I moved out as quickly as possible. I rented a little apartment near my first job and began living my life on my own terms. It wasn't easy, but it felt great to be free of their expectations. I worked hard, lived frugally, and began saving. Meanwhile, Ella married Josh, whom my parents adore despite the fact that he is constantly between jobs. They now have 3 children: Emily, 5, Mason, 4, and baby Daniel, 2. My folks are continually bailing them out. When their automobile broke down last year, my parents handed them money to get a new one. When Ella complained about how difficult it was to keep up with 3 children, Mom and Dad offered to babysit on weekends. I wish it didn't bother me anymore, but it still does. No matter how much I do on my own, it seems like I'll always be second to Ella. That is why I no longer share many details about my life with my family. I know they wouldn't mind. Not really. So, I've been keeping this quiet. But I recently decided it was time to start looking for a home. I've been renting this tiny apartment for years, paying way too much for what is essentially a glorified shoebox, and I've been saving for what seems like an eternity. I eventually got to the point where I was like, you know what? I deserve this. Okay, here's the thing. I didn't tell my family. Not because it's a big secret, but because they can't simply be pleased for anyone. Everything becomes a group project with them. If I addressed anything, I knew they'd start making it about Ella and her children, and how whatever I get should help them. So I decided it was easier to keep my lips shut until all was said and done. Apparently that was overly hopeful. I'm not sure how this happened, but a woman I work with, let's call her Lisa, managed to let it slip. Lisa is one of those persons that is constantly involved in other people's lives. And I believe she casually revealed to someone that I was house searching. That person happened to be Ella's neighbor, and the word spread like wildfire. The delights of small-town Texas. A few days later, my mother contacted me. "Charlotte," she remarked, her tone excessively pleasant. "Why didn't you tell us you're looking for a house?" I should have known better, but I chose to play dumb. "Oh, I'm just browsing around right now. Nothing serious." "Well, Ella and I were talking, and we have some great ideas for you. You're going to need something big enough for everyone. You know, at least 4 bedrooms. For the kids, of course." "What? What children? I don't have children." She kept going as if this were the most regular thing in the world. "You'll need space for Ella's family when they visit, and for us too. Oh, and it'd be great if it was close to Ella's place." I'm not sure why I was startled. She had already turned my potential house into the solution to their issues. I said something non-committal, and hung up the phone as quickly as I could, thinking it was a one-time occurrence. But oh no, it wasn't. My mom and Ella began flooding me with house listings after that. I'm not exaggerating when I say it felt like a part-time job for them. Every day, I'd get at least a dozen links to these crazy houses, large homes with 4 or 5 bedrooms, pools, 3-car garages, and the works. It was as if they assumed I was looking for a reality TV mansion. Mom texted once, "Did you see that one on Maple Street? It's a huge one. Just perfect." Another time, Ella gave me a link to a 6-bedroom house with the following note. "This would be so suitable for us. We could finally have space to spread out, us." I stared at the message for a good minute, wondering how my property purchase had become a collaborative endeavor. The worst part was that they weren't even attempting to pretend it was about me. Every place they recommended was oriented toward Ella's family. "This one has a finished basement. Josh could turn it into his man cave. The kids would love the pool in this one. Look, Charlotte, there's even a guest room for Mom and Dad when they visit." It was exhausting. At first I attempted to gently lead them away, explaining that I was looking for something small, just for myself, but that simply made matters worse. That's when I decided to cease responding. I silenced the group chat and disregarded their messages. I assumed they would finally get the point and move on. Meanwhile, I continued searching for houses on my own. I would spend my evenings reading through Zillow and my weekends looking at open houses. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, and I avoided anything slightly related to Ella's area. I didn't want to run into anyone who might tell my mother. After weeks of looking, I finally found it. A little 2-bedroom cottage just outside the city. It has everything I desired. A nice little porch, a sunny kitchen, and a lawn large enough for gardening. It wasn't elegant, but it felt familiar. The moment I stepped through the door, I knew it was mine. I submitted an offer, and a few nerve-wracking days later, it was accepted. I can't even explain how fantastic it felt. For the first time in my life, I was doing something solely for myself, with no influence from anyone. Of course, I did not inform my family. I decided to let them keep delivering their helpful suggestions while I silently moved forward. But then my mom called me out of nowhere and asked, "We're having dinner next weekend, are you coming?" I nearly said no. But then I had a thought. You know what? Let's get this over with. So I'm going to this dinner, and I already know what it will be like. They'll probably have a full PowerPoint presentation prepared. This is the fun part. I'm about to reveal that I've already acquired a house. I am not going to sugarcoat it either. I can already hear theatrical gasps and complaints. Thank you for sticking around. I'll update you after dinner. Update 1. Hello again, Reddit. First and foremost, I'd like to thank everyone who commented and offered advice on my previous article. I've read the majority of them, and they've been both informative and entertaining. Many of you expressed surprise at how entitled my family sounds, and believe me, I share your sentiments. Others shared their experiences with similar situations, and it's reassuring to know I'm not alone. Anyway, I promised you an update after supper, so here we go. Buckle up, because this was a lot. So I arrived at my folks' house last Saturday at precisely 6 p.m., attempting to mentally prepare for whatever garbage they were about to hurl at me. The moment I went in, there was already commotion. Ella's kids were screaming, Josh was sitting on the couch watching TV, and my mother was hurrying around the kitchen. She looked over and said, "Oh good, you're on time for once. We are off to a good start, right?" We sat down for supper, and the conversation began with the normal small talk. Dad complained about gas prices. Josh vented about something at work, while Ella complained about how difficult it is to manage 3 children. Daniel keeps waking up in the middle of the night, she explained, scooping mashed potatoes onto her plate. We're just so cramped. I feel like I'm losing my mind. I knew where this was going, but I played along by nodding compassionately while concentrating on my lasagna. My mother then cleared her throat, as she does when she is about to make an announcement. "Charlotte," she added with a huge smile. "We've been talking, and we think we found the perfect house for you." I almost choked on my water. Of course, they'd arrive with a plan. "Oh," I asked, keeping my tone as neutral as possible. "Yes," Ella chimed in. "It's a beautiful place, and it's only a few blocks from us. It has 5 bedrooms, a huge yard for the kids, and even a guest suite." Mom interrupted before I could respond. "It's perfect for everyone. There's enough space for the kids to finally have their own rooms, and Josh could even set up an office. Plus, it's in such a great neighborhood, close to good schools." I just stared at them, bewildered. They weren't even pretending it was about me anymore. "So," Ella replied, beaming as if everything was settled, "we can go see it tomorrow if you want." That's when I decided I'd had it. "Actually," I responded, setting down my fork, "I've already bought a house." The room went completely silent. Even the children stopped making noise. "What?" Mom asked, her voice harsh. "I bought a house," I reiterated. "It's a small 2-bedroom cottage just outside the city. It's perfect for me." For a little moment, I considered whether they would be pleased with me. Mom's face turned red and Ella's mouth virtually dropped to the floor. "A cottage?" Ella finally asked, her tone full of skepticism. "How are we supposed to fit in a cottage?" "You're not," I responded. "Because it's my house. I bought it for myself." Mom stepped in before Ella could react. "Charlotte, how could you make such a big decision without consulting us? We've been working so hard to find the perfect place for you." "No," I replied, trying to maintain my cool. "You've been working hard to find the perfect place for Ella and her family. I didn't need your help. I knew what I wanted, and I bought it." Ella's voice became quite high-pitched, as if she were about to cry. "But we need this, Charlotte. Do you know how hard it is for us in that tiny apartment? Emily and Mason have to share a room, and Daniel's crib is in our bedroom. It's not fair to the kids." I took a deep breath and tried not to snap. "That's not my problem, Ella. I've worked hard to get to this point, and I'm not giving up my dream house to fix your situation." That's when Dad decided to join in. He smashed his hand onto the table and yelled, You're being selfish, Charlotte. Family is supposed to help each other. What's wrong with you? I stood up, my heart racing. I'm not selfish. I'm finally standing up for myself. And if that makes me the bad guy in your eyes, so be it. The place erupted into turmoil. Ella was crying. Mom was ranting about how she had raised me better. Dad was complaining about how dissatisfied he was. Josh sat there stuffing food into his mouth as if nothing was occurring. I grabbed my handbag and went to the door. Mom followed me and shouted, "You can't just walk away from your family like this." I turned back to say, "Watch me." Then I got into my car and drove home, shivering with wrath and relief. I feel like I've finally spoken up, but now I'm bracing for the consequences. So, that's where things are. I will let you know what happens next. Thank you for your continued support. You don't realize how much it's helped. Update 2. Hello again, Reddit. Thank you so much for all of your support and comments following my last update. I wasn't expecting such a show of support, and it's honestly helped me preserve my sanity. Many of you were correct. I should have seen this coming. After that evening, things went just as I had dreaded. So, here's an update. Ella sent the first SMS that night. It was simply a photo of her children lounging on their couch, surrounded by toys, with the caption, "Look how cramped we are. Do you think this is fair to Emily and Mason?" I didn't respond. What was I supposed to say? That it was somehow my fault that her place was a mess? That buying a property for myself had somehow resulted in her children sharing a room? I turned my phone to silent and went to bed, hoping she would let it go. She did not. The next morning, I awoke to 5 missed calls from my mother and a flurry of texts from Ella. A person commented, "You always think about yourself. I thought family mattered to you." Another person stated, "Mom is so upset she couldn't even sleep last night." Finally, the pièce de résistance. "You've changed, Charlotte. This isn't the sister I grew up with." Right, because the sibling she grew up with was too busy being ignored to develop a spine. I resolved to disregard it all and concentrate on my work. But the texts did not cease. Every several hours my mother would join in with her own gems. "You're being so selfish, Charlotte. We're all disappointed in you. I hope you realize what you're doing to Ella's kids. You need to reconsider. It's not too late to sell the house and buy something better suited for the family." I silenced each of them, but they then began leaving voicemails. It was the same guilt-ridden babble, but hearing their voices made it more impactful. Mom seemed genuinely angry. Ella sounded like she was about to cry, and at one point my father called and shouted at me for 5 minutes about how I was ripping the family apart. It did not stop there. A few days later, I received a call from my aunt, whom I hadn't spoken to in years. She said, "I heard about what's going on with Ella. Can't you find it in your heart to help? Family comes first, Charlotte." I had to laugh. This was the same aunt who hardly acknowledged my existence growing up, and now she wants to lecture me on family. I told her I wasn't talking about it and hung up. Then came the Facebook posts. Ella shared a photo of her kids squished close on their bunk bed with the caption, "All they want is a little space to grow, but I guess some people think family isn't worth helping anymore." The comments were filled with sympathy from her pals, who had no idea what was going on. Things like this: "You're such a great mom. Whoever's letting you down doesn't deserve you." Also, "How could anyone leave you guys in that situation?" I wanted to shout. She made me out to be the villain, and I couldn't even defend myself without becoming petty. So I kept silent and continued scrolling. But then my mother put something on her own page. She posted a photo of my residence. I don't know how she acquired it. With this caption, "It's so sad when someone forgets where they came from. Family sacrifices so much for you, and this is how they repay you." I blocked both of them right away, but not before a coworker messaged me to ask what was going on. Lisa, yes, that Lisa, appears to have read the message and was discussing it at work. Now, half of the staff assumed I had abandoned my family to live alone in a mansion. For the record, my home is only a cottage, not exactly lifestyles of the rich and famous. The stress was beginning to get to me. Every time my phone vibrated, I felt a rush of fear. I stopped using social media and ignored my email. Even when I was working, I couldn't concentrate because I was anticipating the next call or message. Ella unexpectedly showed up at my flat one evening, bringing things to a new low. I opened the door to see her standing there with Daniel on her hip and the other 2 kids in tow. She was fatigued, and the children were all weeping or whining about something. "Charlotte," she exclaimed, her voice cracking. "We need to talk." I crossed my arms and stood in the doorway, preventing them from entering. "What do you want, Ella?" "Please," she pleaded with tears in her eyes. "We don't have anywhere else to go. The landlord's raising our rent again, and we can't afford it. Just let us stay with you for a little while. The kids need stability." I felt my heart fall, but I remained tough. "Ella, I'm sorry you're struggling, but my house isn't an option. It's not big enough, and honestly, this isn't my responsibility." She looked at me as if I'd just kicked her puppy. "So that's it? You're just going to let us suffer?" "I'm not letting you suffer. I've worked hard to get where I am, and I'm not going to let you guilt me into giving it all up." She murmured something under her breath, then turned and stomped away, her children trailing behind. I shut the door and leaned against it, feeling both guilty and relieved. My mother called the next morning and told me I was callous for turning Ella away. She scolded me for being cold and ungrateful, and warned that I might come to regret it eventually. I hung up without saying anything. Even as I write this essay, their SMS keeps flashing up on my phone. Mom is sending walls of guilt-ridden paragraphs, while Ella is sending images of her children. I even received a voicemail from Dad just now that began with, "I hope you're happy." And I didn't care to listen to the rest. I cannot take it any longer. The first thing I'll do tomorrow morning is change my phone number and give it exclusively to trusted friends and coworkers. It is evident that they will not stop unless I entirely cut them off. I'll deal with social media later, increasing my privacy settings and blocking anyone who might try to stir the pot. One thing at a time. I will notify you once I have completed everything. Thank you for all of your comments and support. It's truly helping me get through this situation. Update 3. Hello Reddit, I am back with another update. So, I've been reading over your comments, and wow, you guys didn't hold back. A lot of you were upset with me for not blocking my family sooner, and you were correct. After changing my phone number, I banned them from everything: Facebook, Instagram, even casual relatives who may have attempted to intervene. It was great to finally cut them off, but, as expected, things quickly became chaotic again. I should have realized that the peace would not endure. It all started last weekend when my mother showed up uninvited at my place. I was in the backyard, trying to figure out how to plant lavender. Google makes it look so simple, but I've already killed 3 plants, when I heard a knock on the front door. At first, I assumed it was my neighbor, or a delivery boy. But when I got to the door, there she was, my mother, standing on my porch with a pie in her hands and the fakest smile I'd ever seen. "Hi Charlotte," she said, as if she had just dropped by for a casual visit and not after weeks of me disappearing. Hi," I answered, quite taken aback. I stood there for a second, contemplating whether I should even let her in, but she threw the pie at me and shouted, "I thought I'd stop by and see how you're doing. I brought your favorite, apple." I wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. "My favorite is cherry, but that's good, Mom." Against my better judgment, I allowed her in. I did not want to cause a scene. She placed the pie on the counter and gazed about the home as if she were taking inventory. "This is lovely, Charlotte," she commented, sliding her hand along the back of a chair. "You've done a great job." I had no idea what to say, so I simply mumbled a brief thank you and waited for her to get to the point. She sat down at my kitchen table and sighed deeply. "I wanted to apologize," she explained. "Things got a little heated, and I realize now that we were wrong to push you like that. You've worked hard for this house, and I should have respected your decisions." I stared at her, trying to determine whether she was serious. It seemed good on the surface, but something about her tone didn't sit well with me. Then she launched into a lengthy speech about how pleased she was of me and how the stress of Ella's condition had caused everyone to behave out. "But that's no excuse," she added, giving me a sad, almost begging expression. For a little moment, I felt myself melting. Maybe she was genuinely attempting to make things right. But then she smacked me with, "I was thinking maybe we could have a fresh start. I'd love to come over again sometime, maybe bring Ella and the kids. It'd be nice for everyone to see your new place." So there it was. I attempted to maintain my cool. "I don't think that's a good idea right now," I answered, carefully selecting my words. "Things are still a little tense and I'm not ready for that yet." She nodded, but I could see she was not pleased with my response. "Of course I understand," she murmured, but her grin was a bit too tight, and her gaze darted around the room as if she was assessing the situation. Following a few minutes of light conversation, she stood up and remarked, "Well, I should get going. Thanks for letting me stop by." "I really mean it, Charlotte. I just want us to be a family again." I nodded without saying anything. When she went, I shut the door and stood there for a long time, staring at the pie on the counter. Something about the entire encounter seemed wrong. For the previous few days, I couldn't stop thinking about the talk. Was she being real, or was this another form of manipulation? The timing seemed far too convenient. After bothering me for weeks, she abruptly apologized and offered me a pie. It also didn't set well with me how fast she dismissed everything that had transpired. She did not mention the messages, voicemails, or the fact that I had blocked her. It was as if she was pretending none of it ever happened, which felt strange. What about bringing Ella and the kids over? That did not seem like a casual suggestion. It felt calculated, as if she was testing the waters to see how much I would let go. I haven't contacted her since, and she hasn't contacted me back either. But I can't get the sensation that this isn't finished. Knowing my family, there's probably something else going on, and I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop. What are your thoughts, Reddit? Was my mother being sincere, or is there more to this than she is letting on? Part of me wants to believe she's sincerely attempting to repair things, but another part of me thinks I'd be an idiot to trust her. Update 4. Hello Reddit. I am back, and gosh, do I have an update for you. Hopefully the final one. I wish I could say things had settled down, but everything has gone from somewhat irritating to really wild. I'm not sure where to begin, but let's just say I've officially stopped giving my family the benefit of the doubt. So, remember how my mother swung by with an apology and a pie? At the time, I told everyone I had a bad feeling about it. It turns out my instincts were correct. Something about her visit didn't sit right with me, and I couldn't figure out why. She looked way too concerned in every element of my residence, from the door locks to the room arrangement. At the time, I dismissed it as her being nosy. However, I now see it was part of a larger plan. A few days following her visit, I resumed my normal routine. Work was hectic, so I spent most of my time holed up in my new home office, focusing on deadlines. I wasn't really thinking about my family. Things had been quiet since the visit, and I wondered whether they were finally backing off. Then came Saturday. I'd gone out to run errands in the morning, the usual stuff, grocery shopping, a trip to Target, and picking up a package at the post office. I arrived home around noon, bags in hand, ready to put everything away and have a relaxing weekend. As I drove into the driveway, I noticed something odd. Ella's SUV was parked directly in front of my house. My heart sank immediately. I approached the door, fumbling with my keys, and heard voices inside. At first, I assumed I had left a window open or my TV turned on, but as I stepped into the entryway, the realization hit me like a brick. Ella, Josh, and the kids were at my house. The scene inside was complete chaos. Emily and Mason were sprawled out on my couch, surrounded by snacks and toys that were not their own. Daniel was toddling about the living room, chewing on one of my throw pillows, as if it were a teething toy. Josh was in the kitchen, looting my refrigerator. And Ella was in the sunroom, rearranging my furnishings as if she were on HGTV. "What the hell is going on?" I asked, my voice quivering with rage and confusion. Ella looked up unaffected. "Oh, hey Charlotte. We figured it'd be easier to just move in while you were out." I glanced at her, trying to understand what she had just said. "Move in? Are you serious?" She rolled her eyes, as if I were the one acting ridiculous. "Mom gave us the key. She said it'd be fine." I felt like I was about to explode. "Mom gave you what key?" "The spare key," she added, pointing to the kitchen counter, where I had left it during Mom's stay. "We really needed the space, and your house is perfect for us. It could have been bigger if you'd listened to us, but it'll do, and Josh can finally have an office." "Get out," I murmured, my voice dangerously calm. "Charlotte, don't be like that," Josh interjected, leaning against my fridge with a sandwich. "You're single, you don't need all this space. This house makes way more sense for us." I couldn't believe what I heard. They were talking about my house as if it were just another handout from my parents for Ella. "Get out of my house," I repeated louder this time. Ella scoffed. "We're family, Charlotte. Stop being so dramatic. We've already started settling in, and the kids love it here. It's not like you're using all this space anyway." I didn't know how to answer. I was so enraged that I couldn't think clearly. Instead of arguing, I took out my phone and dialed 911. "Seriously?" Ella preguntó, su voz llena de asombro. "You're calling the cops on your own family." "Watch me," I said, holding up the phone for her to see. When the dispatcher answered, I gently stated the situation. My sister and her family had broken into my home and refused to leave. Ella and Josh attempted to argue with me while I was on the phone, but I ignored them. By the time the cops arrived, I was shivering from adrenaline, but I was also determined not to let them get away with it. The cops were professional but firm. They questioned Ella and Josh why they were in the house, and their explanation was as ludicrous as you'd imagine. "We're family," Ella stated as if it were a solid legal argument. Josh kept saying I had plenty of space and it was the right thing to do. The officers wouldn't have it. They informed Ella and Josh that they were trespassing and that they should leave immediately. Ella burst into tears, claiming she had no idea it was such a huge issue, and Josh muttered something about my being selfish. I remained silent during the incident, letting the officers handle it. It was rather nice to see Ella and Josh pick up their belongings, including the food they had grabbed from my pantry, and shuffle out the door. After they went, one of the officers approached me and asked if I wanted to file charges. I considered it briefly, but honestly, all I wanted was for them to leave. I told the officer that I did not want to seek charges as long as they stayed away from my property. He nodded and promised to file a report if anything else happened. After they left, I locked the door and stood there for a bit, taking everything in. My house felt different suddenly, almost like it had been defiled. The thought of them just letting themselves in without asking, without caring how I felt, made my skin crawl. I've already phoned a locksmith to change all of the locks, and I'm considering adding a security system as well. I am done giving them the benefit of the doubt. This was not a misunderstanding or an act of desperation. This was entitlement, plain and simple. I'm still struggling to process the reality that my own sister believed this was okay. And the fact that my mother gave them the key? I don't even have words for it yet. I called my lawyer this morning, explained the scenario, and he drafted and sent a formal cease and desist letter to my mother, Ella, and Josh. The letter explained what they had done and stated unequivocally that if they continued to harass me, I would not hesitate to seek legal action. Anyway, that's where things stand right now. I'm still outraged, but I'm also feeling numb. Part of me wonders if this is truly over, or if they'll attempt anything again. Thank you again to everyone who has followed and supported me during this wild adventure. Your wisdom, validation, and sometimes tough love have meant more to me than I can express. Take care, Reddit. My sister faked stage 3 cancer, took over my room, and got me labeled a narcissist, so I caught her lying with 17 audio tapes. Growing up, I always wanted to be best friends with my older sister Mia. I bought all of my clothes based on what she wore, and anytime she adopted a pastime, I would follow suit. But instead of wanting to be my greatest friend, she began to perceive me as her #1 adversary. I copied her whenever she came home after receiving an award for jogging, dancing, or any other hobby she enjoyed. I was the first person she told. "Bet you couldn't do this, could you?" She'd wave the prize in my face, but instead of crying or becoming envious, I'd hold her tightly and tell her how proud I was of her. But this only made her furious, and she'd shove me away, sometimes so violently that my entire body fell on the floor. But it wasn't until my 12th birthday that I gave up trying, when our parents bought me a pink, glittering bike that Mia had always wanted. As soon as I unpacked it, I dashed up to her room and knocked on her door. When I walked her into the back garden and showed her what I had, I asked if she wanted to be the first to ride it. "Sure," she replied with a sneer on her face. She said she wanted to ride it on the road, and because she was 16, I assumed she was mature enough to ride responsibly. Instead of sitting in the seat, she locked eyes with me and hurled it onto the wide road, just as a truck drove by and crushed it. My heart broke, and that's when my childhood ended. I resolved never to tell her about my accomplishments or any other aspects of my life. Unfortunately, when I was 14, I took first place in the regional cross-country championships. Because Mia hadn't moved out for college yet, she overheard my parents discussing it. To my amazement, instead of freaking out, she asked to attend my awards ceremony. I excitedly said yes, since I assumed she was attempting to re-establish our friendship. On the big day, the coach revealed the winners in order of lowest to highest, but he never spoke my name because Mia collapsed onto the floor just before he could. Everyone turned to face my family, asking whether she was all right. She didn't wake up again until you could hear the ambulance sirens outside. "Oh, sorry everyone," she said, jolting upright. "I just didn't eat enough food today." Everyone was relieved to discover she was fine. I rolled my eyes. From there, I kept almost everything in my life a secret, not just from my sister and dad, but from the rest of my family. It made life more lonely, and it took a lot to overcome the impulse to rush to my parents when I received good news. Fast forward to when I was 17 and was accepted to an Ivy League university. My parents discovered the acceptance letter before me. When I went home, my mother exclaimed, "Honey, we are so proud of you." They immediately began snapping pictures of me with my acceptance letter to post on their social media. And for the first time in years, I let them be pleased for me, knowing that Mia couldn't destroy it. But once again, I was mistaken, as I awoke the next morning to my parents barging into my room and tossing all of my belongings into black garbage bags. "Your sister has just been diagnosed with stage 3 ovarian cancer. She'll need one room for her belongings and one to sleep in." My mother's voice was quivering, and my father was in tears. I knew she was faking it. I only wanted some evidence. Mia smirked as she returned home later that day. Her hair was entirely bald, which is interesting because I saw a photo of her hair floating in the breeze on her account just a month ago. Nonetheless, she lay down and slept. That the cancer was exhausting her. That night, I prepared her favorite supper, lulling her into false security. After 2 weeks of me sleeping on the couch, Mia threw a party to honor her own courage. She invited everyone we knew, including several females from my class. Perfect. Halfway through, I tapped my Fanta glass with a fork. "Mia, make a speech. We're so proud of you." She instantly made a speech. I'd seen her practice dozens of times in the bathroom mirror. I approached her and hugged her as she was halfway through her phony tears. And just as I was going to pull away, I removed the bald cap. Her blonde hair trailed down to her waist. Mia yelled. My mother gasped so fiercely that I thought her lungs would shrivel up. While everyone processed what was going on, I switched on the television at maximum volume. I showed a video I had taken of Mia rehearsing her speaking in the mirror while she thought no one was looking. Instead of eventually admitting to her lies, she stormed out of the house and drove away. I went upstairs to my room and let my parents cope with saying farewell to all of the guests. The next morning, I awoke to my mother hitting me across the face. "How could you have embarrassed Mia like that while she's battling with cancer?" I simply stared at her, my cheeks blazing. My mother said Mia informed them I had taken out her hair extensions. She had spent thousands on realistic ones since she didn't want others to feel sorry for her because she was bald. She did not want to show off her affluence by acknowledging she could afford such expensive extensions. I couldn't think my folks would buy that narrative, but they did. They were fully convinced that their cancer-stricken daughter had concealed hair extensions, which I mercilessly disclosed. The situation worsened over the next few days. Mia returned with a stack of medical records. She had appointment cards, test results, and a treatment plan. I'm not sure how she produced them, but they appeared genuine enough to persuade my parents. The letterhead appeared to be legitimate. Then she started telling them I was emotionally abusive and had been tormenting her about her cancer diagnosis. She claimed I was jealous of the attention she was receiving and was attempting to make everything about my college acceptance. My parents set up an emergency therapy appointment for me. They informed the therapist that I was showing signs of narcissistic personality disorder and needed immediate assistance. The therapist appeared hesitant at first, but my parents were convinced, so she agreed to meet me twice a week. These sessions were harsh. I had to sit there while this woman questioned why I felt compelled to hurt my ailing sister. She wanted to investigate my jealousy issues and demand for attention. I attempted to explain that Mia was lying, but it only made me look worse. The therapist would nod and make notes on my denial. Meanwhile, Mia had taken over the house. She'd organize these small events where extended relatives would come to see the heroic cancer patient. She'd make these subtle remarks about how difficult it was to have an unsupportive sister. Nothing clear enough to call out, but enough to turn everyone against me. I began capturing everything. I took notes whenever she made a mistake or contradicted herself. When she claimed to have chemo on Tuesday but posted selfies in the mall, I took screenshots. I was putting together a case, but I needed something tangible. One night, I arrived home late from school. I had been working on a large project at the library. When I opened my laptop, the screen was shattered and would not power on. All of my schoolwork was gone. Years of essays and projects were suddenly destroyed. The keyboard was bent as if it had been trodden on. I discovered Mia in the kitchen, making tea. She grinned at me and stated that technology can be so unreliable. Then she inquired whether I had backed up my college application materials. The way she stated it indicated that she knew exactly what had happened to my laptop. I spent the next week reassembling everything from memory. I had to redo assignments and ask teachers for extensions. Some believed me, while others assumed I was making excuses. Due to the stress, my grades began to slide. At school, rumors circulated that I was unstable, Someone informed everyone that I had attacked my cancer-stricken sister during her own support party. People I had known for years began avoiding me in the hallways. My lunch table gradually emptied until I was dining alone. Then I received a letter from my ideal college. They had received an anonymous warning regarding suspicious activity and wanted to discuss my admission. Someone had complained that I was bullying a family member who had a terminal illness. They needed to conduct an investigation before confirming my admission. I was sure it was Mia, but I couldn't prove it. She had taken great effort to be anonymous, but she made one mistake. She utilized particular wording from her previous complaints. I immediately recognized her writing style. I decided to be innovative in my evidence collection. I purchased tiny voice recorders and hid them about the home. I wanted to catch her admitting something while she thought no one was listening. I hid them behind picture frames and under tables, anywhere she may let her guard down. The recordings captured more than I expected. Late at night I'd hear Mia on the phone, giggling at how naive our parents were. Her voice cut through the thin walls between our rooms, oozing with scorn as she portrayed their anxious expressions. She'd gloat to her friends about taking my room and derailing my college ambitions, punctuating each disclosure with nasty chuckles. She'd even mimic our mother's anxious tone, intensifying it until her buddies cackled on the other end. I saved every single file to different cloud accounts, creating backup after backup with trembling hands. Each tape was labeled with the date and time and stored in folders that chronicled weeks of deception. But I wanted someone who would really listen. My parents were in denial, their eyes glazing over whenever I tried to point out contradictions in Mia's statement. When I addressed her behavior, they would change the conversation or suddenly remember important errands. That's when I remembered Aunt Amelia. She'd always been suspicious of Mia, even when we were youngsters, catching her in minor lies at family gatherings. She was the only one who recognized Mia's claim to have won a spelling bee at a school that didn't even have one. Amelia was 2 hours away, but perhaps she could help. Mia was monitoring my cell phone, so I contacted her from a payphone at school. The phone booth, hidden behind the gymnasium and out of sight, smelled of rust and old gum. The metal receiver felt cold against my ear as I inserted quarters into the slot, my hands groping for the coins. Amelia answered on the third ring, and her pleasant voice immediately made me feel safer. I told her everything as quickly as I could, words crashing over each other like water breaking over a dam. She remained silent for a long time, breathing steadily on the other end, before admitting she had feared something was wrong when Mia's cancer narrative kept shifting. It began as lymphoma, then leukemia, and finally a rare variety that changed nomenclature several times. Amelia agreed to visit that weekend. She said she'd pretend it was to support Mia, but she truly wanted to see the proof I had gathered. Her voice retained the hard edge I recalled from when she assisted me with arithmetic homework years ago. Finally, somebody believed me. I hung up, feeling optimistic for the first time in weeks. The spring in my step drew curious glances from passing pupils. When I went home that Friday, I discovered that my recordings were missing. Every device has vanished from its hiding spots. The drawer under my desk was empty, with dust outlines indicating where the recorders had been. The box in my closet has been emptied out. Even my backup USB discs, which I had placed in an old shoe, were missing. Mia sat on the couch, reading a magazine as if nothing had happened, her legs tucked beneath her. Her fingers slowly turned the pages of a celebrity gossip magazine. When I questioned them, she stated she had no idea what I was talking about, without even looking up from her book. Her voice sounded innocent and practiced, as if she had prepared for this moment. I still had my cloud backups, but now I was nervous. That night, I reset my passwords and enabled two-factor authentication on everything. I even set up dummy accounts with fake proof in case she got into those as well. My fingers moved quickly over the keyboard as I added layer after layer of digital security. I utilized password managers and security questions that only I could answer, such as references to novels Mia had never read or places she'd never visited. Amelia arrived on Saturday morning with a casserole and a concerned countenance. She wore her good pearls, which she kept for special occasions, and her gray hair was newly styled. She hugged Mia and told her how brave she was, saying her acting talents were better than any I'd seen before. Mia ate it up, talking about her treatment and how difficult it was. She even managed to make her voice quaver at precisely the proper times. I watched from the kitchen, biting my tongue so hard it tasted like copper. The casserole sat on the counter, still warm, and smelled like childhood comforts I couldn't get. Amelia later asked to see my room so she could help me reorganize it after I gave it up for Mia. It was a brilliant excuse that would avoid suspicion. When we were alone, I showed her everything on my phone, including the recordings, screenshots, and timeline of lies I had meticulously documented. Every piece of evidence was annotated with context and cross-references. Her expression darkened with each piece of evidence, and her jaw tightened as she heard Mia's malicious laughter. She had to sit on my bed when she learned about Mia's intention to intercept my college acceptance letter. We spent an hour going through everything. Amelia pointed out discrepancies I'd overlooked, such as how Mia claimed to get chemo every Monday but was never sick on Tuesdays, or how her medical records all had the same watermark pattern, although being from various offices. She showed me how the typefaces matched perfectly and the margins were identical. She also noted that the medical terminology was somewhat incorrect, as if someone had studied terms online rather than copying from actual sources. Her years at a law company managing medical malpractice lawsuits had honed her eye for genuine medical documentation. Amelia said she'd speak with my parents, but we needed to be strategic. If we came on too strong, they'd become defensive and shut down entirely. She'd seen it before with her own siblings, how confrontation can backfire when individuals are emotionally involved in a falsehood. She advised waiting until supper, when everyone would be relaxed. I agreed, even though waiting felt impossible, and my stomach was churning with anxiousness. We spent the afternoon pretending everything was fine, assisting Mom in the kitchen and listening to Dad's work stories. At dinner, Mia was in full performance mode. She pushed food around her plate, sighing about how the treatment had reduced her appetite. She'd taken precisely 3 small bites of chicken, slicing it into tiny pieces for maximum effect. My mother instantly offered to cook her something different, leaping up from the table. Dad massaged her shoulder and told her she was very strong, his voice full of emotion. The dining room was oppressive from all the manufactured pity. Amelia started casually. She inquired about Mia's treatment plan and the hospital she was using. Her tone was conversational, as if she were inquiring about the weather. Mia provided vague responses regarding privacy and not wanting to burden everyone with details. Amelia pushed a little harder, stating that she had a friend who was an oncologist and could help. She even got out her phone, as if she was ready to make the call right then. Mia's eye twitched, but she concealed it by wiping away artificial tears. She responded she appreciated the offer, but her team was taking care of everything. When Amelia asked for the oncologist's name so she could send a thank you letter, Mia suddenly needed to go to the restroom, her chair scraping across the floor. She went slowly, emphasizing her weakness, one hand dragging along the wall for support. Amelia glanced at my parents as she departed. She inquired whether they had attended any appointments with Mia. My mother said they hadn't since Mia insisted on her independence. She looked ashamed and twisted her napkin in her lap. Dad said that Mia was shielding them from the hard reality, his hands folded tightly on the table. His knuckles were white from strain he hadn't realized he was holding. Amelia took out her phone and showed them my evidence. They initially refused to look, turning their heads aside as if they were toddlers avoiding vegetables. Amelia insisted on looking through each recording and screenshot painstakingly. She had them sorted into a presentation that was professional and undeniable. My mother's face became white when she heard Mia joking about deceiving them, and her hand flew to her lips. Dad's countenance evolved from amazement to horror to wrath in the space of 30 seconds. Mia returned to find all of us staring at her. The silence was terrible, interrupted only by the tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. She instantly began crying about how we were ganging up on a cancer sufferer. When it didn't work, she accused me of using artificial intelligence to create fake recordings. Then she claimed I had drugged her to make her say those things, and her falsehoods became more frantic and crazy. Every new reason contradicted the previous one, like a house of cards toppling in real time. My father stood up slowly, his chair creaking with the weight change. He asked her directly if she had cancer. His voice had the same tone as when I was younger, and he had caught me smuggling cookies. Mia tried more tears, but he simply repeated the inquiry, his voice steady and forceful. Finally, she exploded. She screamed that we all admired my accomplishments more than hers, and that my dumb college acceptance had diverted her parents' attention. Years of hatred spilled out of her mouth. The facts poured out in a torrent. She admitted to faking everything, but blamed us for making her feel invisible. She had spent years as the older sister, but I got all the credit for emulating her. She said that breaking my bike was the only time she felt powerful, her face contorted with years of buried wrath. She even admitted to lesser things I hadn't suspected. I hid my library books to avoid penalties, told kids at school humiliating stories about myself, and deleted my essays from the family computer. My mother began sobbing, loud, painful cries that shook her entire body. Dad had to sit back down because his legs were giving out, grabbing the edge of the table. The wood moaned beneath his fingers. Amelia videotaped the entire confession on her phone, just in case Mia tried to dispute it later. I felt numb as I watched my family fall apart, as if I were floating above it all. The untouched food on the table seemed ludicrous in the face of such devastation. Mia was not done, however. She lunged at me, yelling that I had wrecked everything. When she attempted to get between us, her claws gripped my mother's arm. When blood poured down Mom's wrist, everyone snapped out of their shock. The red drops hit the white tablecloth and spread like miniature roses. Mom glanced at her arm, as if she didn't understand what had occurred. Dad grabbed Mia and dragged her back. She was thrashing and screaming about how much she despised me, how I stole her life by being born, and how every accomplishment I had was designed to make her appear horrible. Years of wrath erupted in one terrible blast, her voice raw and savage. The neighbor's dog began barking, sensing the pandemonium through the walls. Amelia dialed 911, while Dad held Mia. She delivered the address quietly, her legal background keeping her focused. The paramedics came for my mother's arm but also took Mia. She had pushed herself into such a state that they were concerned she would harm herself. As they carried her away, she started crying, "It's all my fault," her voice echoing down our peaceful neighborhood. Porch lights flickered on as neighbors looked through the curtains. The house felt empty after that. Mom required sutures and medicines. The doctor indicated the scratches were severe but would heal well. They cleaned and bandaged her arm gently and efficiently. Dad drove her home in silence, the only sound being the buzz of the automobile motor. Neither of us knew what to say. Mom's hospital wristband caught the streetlights as we parked into our driveway. That night, my parents sat me down to apologize. They claimed they were so surprised by the cancer story that they never questioned it. They had intended to support their ailing daughter, but ended up encouraging her falsehoods. When Mom mentioned smacking me, she grieved and softly touched my cheek. The gesture was very different from that day, sensitive and full of sadness. I told them about all Mia had done over the years, not to hurt them, but to help them understand that this was nothing new. They were appalled to hear about the birthday bike and the awards ceremony. They had no idea how long this had been going on, and each revelation struck them like a physical blow. Dad continued to shake his head, muttering about signs he had missed. We decided Mia needed professional assistance. Real therapy, not the kind they had imposed on me. Dad called around and discovered a clinic that specializes in personality issues. They had an opening for the next week provided Mia agreed to travel. He spent hours on the phone, filling his notebook with names and numbers, insurance coverage, treatment options, and success rates. He researched as if his life depended on it. Meanwhile, I needed to fix my life. The college was still investigating the anonymous complaint. I emailed them the recording of Mia's confession, along with Amelia's letter describing the situation. I supplied my therapy notes, which showed that I was the victim, not the bully. Each document felt like a piece of my dignity had been restored. The admissions officer personally contacted me to apologize for any mistake. School was more difficult to fix. Rumors do not die easy, especially in a tiny high school where gossip is commonplace. Some people believed me when I explained, while others assumed I was making excuses. I concentrated on my actual buddies and ignored the chatter in the corridor. It ached, but I had survived worse. My AP teachers were particularly supportive, having witnessed my dedication personally. My professors were more tolerant when I explained about the laptop and showed them the police report Dad had filed. They gave me extensions. I spent weeks catching up on schoolwork while my desk lamp burned late into the night. My grades gradually improved, but it was exhausting. Each test and paper was a mountain to conquer. Coffee became my best buddy, and the librarians recognized me by name. Mia returned home following 3 days of surveillance. She was compelled to attend treatment twice every week. The therapist stated that she had symptoms of narcissistic personality disorder with antisocial characteristics. She cautioned us that it would take years of work to address, and she set realistic expectations. She handed us booklets on family dynamics and enabling attitudes. Mia returned to her former room without apology. We avoided one another totally, resulting in invisible boundaries in our shared places. When we passed in the corridor, she would look through me as if I didn't exist. I was fine with it. I had given up on having a sister years ago. The house felt like it was divided in two, distinct universes coexisting under one roof. But she wasn't finished attempting to hurt me. I found her in my room one day, checking over my college paperwork. When I approached her, she said that she was merely borrowing a pen. But I noticed my acceptance letter was crumpled, as if she had been crushing it. The official seal was wrinkled beyond repair. The invasion of MySpace made my skin crawl. That night, I secured my door with a lock. My parents did not oppose, recognizing the requirement without my explanation. They understood that we needed boundaries as Mia worked through her challenges. Mom even helped me select a robust deadbolt from the hardware store, evaluating each one for strength. The click of that lock became a signal of safety. The following few months were tense. Mia would have good days when she appeared almost normal, laughing at TV shows and assisting with dishes. Then she'd experience setbacks, and the rage would return. Her therapist told us that rehabilitation was not linear. We have to be patient, while also protecting ourselves. Family dinners became lessons in cautious navigation. I started storing anything critical in a safe, including my laptop, documents, and sentimental objects, every night. It seemed harsh, but I couldn't risk another sabotage attempt. The safe offered me peace of mind so that I could concentrate on my studies. The combination was my birthday, something Mia had always disliked. Even selecting those numbers felt like regaining something. College finally confirmed that they would keep my acceptance. The admissions board stated that they understood the circumstance and appreciated my candor. They even provided resources for coping with familial trauma. I cried while reading that email, relief washing over me in waves. My future was once again guaranteed. The route forward is clear. Prom season approached, and I allowed myself to become excited. I bought a gorgeous dress on discount, and my friend Aaron invited me to go as friends. It was nice to have something typical to look forward to. I even found myself singing while completing homework, old happiness sneaking back in. The dress hung in my wardrobe like a promise for one perfect night. I was applying my makeup for prom when I heard a collision. My dress was on the floor, covered with what appeared to be bleach. The cloth was destroyed, with large white splotches all over the blue material. Mia's bathroom door clicked, shutting down the hall. The toxic odor burnt my nose. I stood there in my slip, staring at the ruined dress, feeling my exhilaration drain away. I wanted to yell, but instead contacted Amelia. She drove over, carrying her daughter's old prom dress. It was green, not blue, but it fit well. Amelia did my hair as I tried not to cry. She said I looked gorgeous and meant it, her hands gently pinning each curl. She even carried identical jewelry in her purse, as if she knew I needed rescue. Nobody cared that my prom dress was not as planned. Aaron and I danced till our feet hurt. For a few hours, I forgot about Mia and the mess at home. I just got to be a normal teenager, celebrating with my buddies. The gym was decorated with glittering lights and silver streamers. We took dozens of photos, with genuine smiles replacing forced ones in family portraits. When I arrived home, Mia was in the living room. When she gazed at the green outfit, her face sank. I realized she had been waiting for me to grieve over the destroyed dress. When I smiled and stated I had a fantastic night, she stormed away to her room, her disappointment evident. For once, her attempt to harm me had failed utterly. The next week, her therapist scheduled a family meeting. She claimed Mia admitted to the dress incident and several other acts of sabotage. The therapist suggested a more intensive program, such as residential treatment, where Mia could focus on recovery without being distracted by external factors. She indicated that the current strategy was not working quickly enough. My parents were torn. They wanted to help Mia but were concerned about sending her away. The therapist emphasized that sometimes distance was required for everyone to heal. She handed them brochures for different programs that specializes in personality disorders, glossy pages full of promises of recovery. Each institution featured testimonials from families who had found peace after separation. That night, I overheard my parents argue. Mom wanted her to attempt the residential program, but Dad believed they had failed Mia by not catching it sooner. They argued over who was to blame. I put on headphones and attempted to concentrate on my homework. Math problems blurred through my tears. Their rising shouts cut through my music. Mia must have heard them as well. For the next day, she proclaimed her intention to seek treatment. She claimed she was weary of being furious all the time. For the first time in years, she appeared fatigued rather than plotting something. Her eyes were shadowed by dark circles. The fight appeared to have left her, replaced by something hollow. We drove her to the institution on the following Monday. It was a 3-hour drive away, surrounded by mountains and gardens. The staff appeared friendly yet firm. They stated that the program will run at least 6 months, with family therapy sessions held once every month. The structure appeared more like a retreat than a hospital. Other families were saying their goodbyes in the parking lot, each with their own heavy stories. Mia hugged our parents goodbye while ignoring me. I was fine with that. I didn't want a teary reconciliation. I just needed her to get help and leave me alone. As we drove away, I felt lighter than I had in years, watching the facility fade into the rearview mirror. The mountains appeared serene, as if they could contain and change all of our family's grief. The house was serene without her. I returned to my room correctly, spreading all my belongings without worry. My dad and I had quiet dinners where we actually spoke. Mom asked about my day again, really interested in my responses. We even played board games some nights, relearning how to be a family of 3. I poured myself into senior year events. I joined the yearbook committee and began tutoring underclassmen in mathematics. My college acceptance was assured, so I could finally enjoy high school. Once the drama subsided, friends resumed their social activities. My calendar was full with typical adolescent events such as study clubs, movie evenings, and college preparation sessions. Life became delightfully ordinary. The first family therapy session was difficult. Mia had to admit the harm she had caused. She read off a list in monotone, apparently upset. However, the therapist explained that acknowledging guilt was the first step, even if she didn't feel it yet. The room smelt like lavender and was very small. We sat in a circle, with more than feet separating us. We went once a month, as necessary. Mia alternated between participating and glaring. The therapist worked with each of us on limits and communication. My parents had to accept that they had supported her behavior by failing to address it earlier. Each session revealed layers of family dysfunction. Mother cried a lot. Dad learned to communicate emotions other than anger. I learned to speak up for myself without feeling guilty. I started visiting my own therapist to get through everything. She helped me see that Mia's troubles were not my fault, and that wanting a sister did not cause this. It took me months to believe that, but I ultimately did. Her workplace became a secure haven in which I could finally breathe. We overcame years of hidden dread and confusion. Senior year rushed by in a whirlwind of events and milestones. I was accepted into the National Honor Society and awarded a grant for my essay on overcoming familial hardships. My parents attended every ceremony, beaming with delight. They'd learnt to enjoy my accomplishments without guilt. The auditorium lights felt warm on my face as I took each prize. Each accomplishment was mine alone, no longer clouded by Mia's jealousy. Mia gradually improved during treatment. Her letters home became less angry and more contemplative. She began accepting responsibility without criticizing others. The therapist stated that she was making significant progress, but warned us not to expect miracles. Recovery would be a lifelong journey rather than a final destination. But for the first time in my life, I had hope. Hope that someday, I'd have the sister I'd always desired, even if that day was still a long way off. Graduation day came faster than expected. I got up early to iron my cap and gown, which remained crisp beneath the hot metal. My parents were already in the kitchen preparing my favorite breakfast, pancakes with strawberries, just like when I was a kid. Dad was shooting shots of everything, including my half-eaten breakfast. Mom fussed over my hair until I gently moved her hands away. The event was scheduled for 10 o'clock, but we left at 8 o'clock because Dad wanted good seats. The high school parking lot was already filled with relatives bearing flowers and balloons. I spotted my pals near the gym's entrance, and we took around 100 selfies. Everyone was commenting on how grown up we looked in our hats and gowns. During the ceremony, I saw my parents on the third row. Mom was already crying before we even started. Amelia sat beside them, camera ready. When they announced my name for the scholarship award, Dad whooped so loudly that everyone turned to watch. I didn't feel humiliated, just proud. After receiving my diploma, I located them among the crowd. A collective hug resulted in more tears from Mom. Amelia handed me a card with a check for college fees. I wanted to return it, but Mom pushed, saying it was an investment in my future. Dad snapped more pictures till my cheeks hurt from smiling. We ate lunch at my favorite restaurant. Halfway through the appetizers, Mom's phone rang. It was a therapy institution. Mia wanted to speak to me. I had not heard her voice in 2 months. My folks gazed at me hopefully, but did not push. I moved the phone outside where it was quieter. She continued, "Congratulations on graduating." Her voice seemed different, calmer, perhaps less harsh around the edges. She asked about my college intentions and truly listened to my response. When I told her about the scholarship, she remarked, "Good job." Not sarcastically, but genuinely. Although the conversation lasted only 5 minutes, it seemed meaningful. The summer passed in a whirl of preparation. Mom and I went college shopping, and she bought entirely too many shower caddies. Dad was teaching me basic car care in the driveway, such as oil changes, tire pressure, and jump-starting batteries. He made me practice everything twice. Amelia arranged a going-away party complete with all of my favorite foods. Before I departed for school, the treatment institution contacted me to schedule a special family session. They stated that Mia had something essential to convey. We drove up on a Saturday. The mountains were green from summer growth. The building seemed less scary now. Families sat in the garden areas and talked peacefully. In the session room, Mia appeared healthier. She had gained weight, and her skin had regained its color. She read from a page, her hands trembling slightly. It was a true apology. She recounted particular occurrences and acknowledged how they had harmed me: the bike, the laptop, and the outfit. Each recollection is carefully investigated. She stated that she had been diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder and borderline characteristics. That was not an excuse, but an explanation. She was learning how to control her emotions without hurting others. The therapist nodded encouragingly as she continued. After she finished, we all sat silently for a time. I did not forgive her. Not yet. But I thanked her for the apologies and added, "I hope the treatment continues to help." That was all I could give at the time. The therapist said that was totally okay. Forgiveness could not be forced or hastened. Everyone had their own timetable for recovering. We ate lunch at a local cafe. Mia arrived with the supervision of a staff member. She ordered soup and ate it. We discussed safe things such as movies and weather. When she inquired about my roommate assignment, I showed her the email. She stated the girl appeared decent, based on her Facebook page. The drive home was silent. My parents were exchanging looks in the front seat. Finally, Mom stated that they were proud of how I conducted myself and that I had demonstrated maturity above my years. Dad added that I owed Mia nothing. Whatever my feelings were, they were valid. 2 weeks before college, I was packing when I discovered something unexpected: a little wrapped box in my desk drawer. Inside was a necklace featuring my birthstone. The ticket stated that Mia had ordered it through the treatment facility's craft program. A small inscription read, "For your new beginning." I stared at it for quite a while. I did not wear it, but I packed it. Maybe someday I will, maybe not. But the gesture meant something, even if I wasn't ready to accept it completely. I gently wrapped it in tissue paper and placed it in my jewelry box. Progress was made in little stages. Move-in day was chaotic. Dad persisted on carrying everything himself till his back arched. Mom organized my dorm room 3 times. My roommate Kimberly and her parents were amused as they watched. By evening, our room resembled a Bed Bath & Beyond explosion, but it felt like home. Saying farewell was more difficult than planned. Mom ugly cried in the parking lot. Dad kept clearing his throat and checking the car's tires. I vowed to call each week and text every day. Amelia had already sent a care package which arrived before I did, with cookies, tea, and a note expressing her pride. College was just what I had dreamed for. Hard, but interesting classes. Pizza fuels late-night study sessions. My roommate and I became great friends after bonding over horrible dining hall cuisine. I joined a jogging club and made more pals. Nobody knew about my family issues, and it felt liberating. The first family therapy session I missed felt strange. Mom called later to fill me in. Mia was doing well, accepting responsibilities without prompting. She'd begun assisting younger residents with their early adaptations. The therapist described it as substantial progress. I was delighted and relieved to be far away. I returned home for Thanksgiving vacation. The house felt different, calmer. My parents had redecorated a few rooms and began holding game nights for friends. They appeared happier and lighter, as if they'd been holding their air for years before suddenly exhaling. Mom made enough food for 20 people. Mia was granted a supervised home visit during Thanksgiving dinner. She looked nervous as she walked through the door. We all sat at the table like strangers, pretending to be family, but eventually talk began. She inquired about my classes and seems genuinely interested in my biology degree. There will be no competitive comments or put-downs. After supper, she helped clear plates without being asked. When Mom brought out the pie, Mia asked if she could say anything. She thanked us for never giving up on her. She admitted that she understood she had put us through hell, but she was determined to improve, even if it was difficult. Dad reached over to squeeze her hand. She returned to treatment that night, but the visit felt productive. I did not hug her farewell, but I did wave from the porch. Small steps. The therapist had stated that healing was not linear. There will be good and bad days. But at least we were moving forwards. Winter break brought further adjustments. Mia finished the first phase of treatment and proceeded into a transitional housing program. She found a part-time job at a bookstore and began taking community college courses online. The framework seemed to benefit her. She needed to follow the rules and satisfy expectations. We had another family session in which the therapist discussed reintegration. Mia would not move home right away, and possibly never, but she could come more frequently, eat supper once a week, and attend family gatherings with advance notice. Everyone required boundaries to feel comfortable. The therapist assisted us in writing them down. I went back to college with cautious optimism. My folks came for parents' weekend and met all of my buddies. Mom embarrassed me by photographing everything, including my filthy dorm room. My dad wore my college sweatshirt everywhere. They seemed quite delighted. I'm not forcing it anymore. The spring semester sped by. I made the dean's list and was invited to join the honors program. My parents framed the letter. Amelia sent celebratory flowers. Even Mia texted that she was proud. Each accomplishment felt completely mine now, with no shadow cast over it and no fear of vengeance. When I returned home during spring break, I discovered that Mia had made multiple visits. My parents said the dinners were going nicely. She was taking responsibility in treatment and worked on emotional regulation. The bookshop manager appreciated her work ethic. Small victories are still successes. Mom maintained a neutral tone when sharing updates. We had dinner together on Wednesday. Mia inquired about my summer plans, and I informed her about my research internship. She thought that sounded amazing and asked genuine questions about the project, not looking for flaws to exploit. When I explained how worried I was, she assured me that I would do well. The supper concluded without incident. She helped to load the dishwasher and thanked Mom for cooking. I said goodbye without seeming weird. After she left, my parents gazed at me with anticipation. I claimed everything was okay. And it was. Not amazing, but not bad. Perfectly fine. Sometimes just fine was enough. Summer provided more steadiness. I plunged myself into the research and enjoyed every minute. My parents came to the lab to learn more about my protein folding study. Mia continued therapy and kept her job. We held family dinners every other week. Conversation became easy with experience. One night, she asked if we could speak quietly. We sat on the back porch like we did as kids. She admitted that she had stolen years from me and could not reclaim them, but she promised to do better in the future. I told her I appreciated it, but trust would take time. Perhaps forever. She replied she understood. We held a final family session before the start of sophomore year. The therapist stated that Mia had made amazing improvement but would require continuous assistance. She had learned to identify her triggers and control her reactions. The personality condition would always exist, but she could choose how it affected others. Everyone had worked hard to arrive here. I returned to college feeling settled. My family was not ideal, but it provided healing. Mia texted about typical things like songs she liked or books she'd read. I reacted whenever I felt like it. There's no pressure either way. We were discovering a new rhythm that worked for everyone. The sophomore year provided new problems and opportunities. I announced my major formally and began conducting research with a professor. My parents contacted frequently to provide information. Mia was taking more classes and doing well. She'd met several friends in her therapy group, taking small steps toward a regular existence. When I returned home for the winter break, Mia had her own place, a studio near the bookstore. She invited us over for supper and really cooked. No one complained, even if the pasta was overdone. She showed us her space with evident delight. Everything looks nice and ordered, indicating a fresh start. We exchanged Christmas gifts awkwardly. She got me a gift card to my favorite retailer, which was both safe and practical. I got her a journal for therapeutic work, also safe, but we were trying. That meant something. Mom snapped pictures of us sitting on the couch. Not entirely pleasant, but not hostile either. The rest of the break was tranquil. Family dinners proceeded without incident. Mia attended my high school friend's party and behaved properly. She even laughed at Aaron's bad jokes. When asked about our relationship, we both replied that it was complicated but improving. That felt honest. I helped her move some furniture one afternoon, just the two of us in her apartment. She turned on music and we worked without any conversation. When we were finished, she poured tea and we relaxed on her new couch. She expressed gratitude that I had given her a chance, even though she felt she didn't deserve it. I talked to her about my college classmates and classes. She listened without interrupting or comparing. When I stated that I was suffering with organic chemistry, she offered to help. It turns out she took it at a community college and did well. We spent an hour reviewing my notes. She was patient and explained everything clearly. That night I informed my folks about the tutoring. They exchanged astonished expressions. Mom said it was excellent. Dad reminded me to set boundaries. I responded I knew, but if everyone stayed well, boundaries may gradually shift to allow for more connectedness. The therapist had mentioned that flexibility was crucial. The spring semester began with new enthusiasm. Mia and I texted about our chemistry homework. She provided excellent videos and practice challenges. My grade increased from C to B+. I thanked her, and she added that assisting me made her feel good since she was giving something positive. For once we established a routine. Weekly school-related texts with monthly video chats to review challenging concepts. She never insisted on greater touch than I offered. When I didn't react for a few days, she didn't blame me, she simply waited until I was ready. The respect for limits seemed significant. By the conclusion of sophomore year, our relationship had stabilized. Not close, but workable. We could share space without stress, and hold talks without ulterior motives. She attended my academic honors ceremony and clapped heartily. There is no scene or drama, only support. That summer I studied abroad in Spain. Mia helped me pack and offered travel advice. She had spent a semester abroad before things fell apart. Her advice on homestays and cultural shock proved useful. We exchanged a brief but genuine goodbye hug at the airport. Mom sobbed happy tears. I mailed postcards home to everyone, including Mia. She kept them in a box, she informed me later. When I returned, she wanted to hear stories and see photographs. She inquired about the studies I had done there. I remembered things from past talks and acted like a regular sister for once. Junior year began with graduate school applications looming. Mia offered to proofread my personal statement. I hesitated, but consented. She provided serious input without attempting to ruin anything, even catching some errors I had missed. When I received interviews, she helped me rehearse constructively and supportively. Years of therapy had transformed her, not into a flawless person, but someone capable of functioning without causing harm to others. She still felt jealous at times. When I relayed positive news, I would see flashes of the old Mia, but she'd stop herself and apologize. Genuine work towards genuine change. When acceptance letters began to arrive, Mom was truly excited for me. No phony cancer diagnoses or unexplained ailments. Just compliments and queries about which program I'd prefer. She even promised to assist me relocate when the time came. I replied we'd see, but I appreciate the offer. Senior year passed quickly as we prepared for the future. Mia attended graduation without making it about her. I sat with my folks and cheered at the proper times. I took photos when asked. They sent me a card with a meaningful message about being proud of my accomplishments. I honestly believed she meant it. That summer, we spent more time together than we had in years. She helped me choose an apartment in my new city, drove me to IKEA for furnishings, and constructed bookcases without complaint. We even laughed at times, not forced or deliberate laughter, but genuine reactions to hilarious moments. The night before I moved, she asked whether we could be genuine sisters one day. Not just now, but soon. Once enough time had gone and trust had been rebuilt. I said, maybe. I wanted to believe it was doable, but couldn't make any promises. She said it was fair, more than she deserved. We loaded the moving truck together. My parents are emotional but attempting to disguise it. Mia is practical and helpful. After everything was packed, she gave me a modest gift, a framed snapshot of us as children, before everything went wrong. Both of us were smiling at the camera. Sisters who had no idea what was coming. I hung it in my new apartment. Not conspicuously, yet visible. A reminder that individuals can change, that families might heal from grave scars, that forgiveness was possible, even if it took years to come. The photograph faced my desk, where I could see it while studying. Two tiny girls who deserved more than they received. Mia and I now text on a regular basis, not daily but consistently. She tells me about her career and courses. I tell stories from graduate school. We are creating something new from the ashes of what was destroyed. It's delicate and imperfect, but it's ours. Maybe that is enough for now. Looking back, I realize how far we've all come. From the awful party where I removed her bald cap until now. Years of treatment, work, and pain, but also growth. My folks are starting to see clearly. Mia is learning to live without destroying. I'm learning to protect myself while remaining open to opportunity. We aren't the family we could have been. There's too much damage for it. But we are the family we choose to be. Scarred but healing. Be cautious, but hopeful. Taking things one day at a time, because that is all anyone can do. That's enough for now.